Welcome back, committee. Let's get started right away, and we're gonna put the accelerator down a little bit and try to get people out of here this afternoon. Some have been here for the last 3 days, and I know that there's some folks anxious to hit the road. Valuable stuff, but let's stay at the 30,000-foot view a little bit. And committee, please don't hesitate to ask the questions that you would like to. I don't mean to expedite us past the information part of this, but we have the rest of the interim too, that we can follow up on any of this. So Tanya, take it away on just, the use of funds. Next
Sure.
topic.
Mr. Chairman, again, members of the committee, Tanya Heitrick, Legislative Service Office, and I'll let Mr. Wilmarth introduce himself.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, again, Matt Wilmarth, LSO Senior School Finance Analyst.
And today we're here in relation to your number one priority for the interim, which is developing knowledge and expertise among members pertaining to school facilities, both for the School Facilities Commission and the State Construction Department. In your meeting materials, there's a memo dated May 15th, 2025, that's an overview of K-12 public school facilities. It outlines your various constitutional obligations with regard to school facilities. And I would just note on that the same principles that apply to operational funding apply to school capital construction. The School Facilities Commission and the State Construction Department were created to work closely with this committee on developing the budget. And while largely the system created remains constitutionally compliant, the district court did find that certain elements were unconstitutional in the recent case, which are being appealed to the Supreme Court. The State Construction Department is charged with developing long-range facility plans in conjunction with school districts that are aligned to state standards to remediate facilities, identify priority non-construction alternative, incorporate demolition, student enrollment projections, proposed new schools, new land acquisitions, and appropriate cost estimates, as well as how they will expend their major maintenance funds and any leased facilities. Those plans are developed with the State Construction Department in conjunction with the school districts. They work closely together. Those are also streamed on the State Construction Department's website, and the School Facilities Commission is required to approve those every 2 years, not less than every 2 years. I do believe that the State Construction Department is doing that annually. In approval of that, they're required to comply with the adequacy standards, identify the most cost-effective remedy, consider non-construction alternatives that are capable for delivering the statewide educational program. In the event that there's a disagreement between the school districts and the State Construction Department or the School Facilities Commission, districts do have the opportunity to challenge those decisions through the Wyoming Administrative Procedures Act. There's also how the budget comes to you is through an annual evaluation of school districts. That results in 2 lists, the capacity and the condition list. Those are required to prioritize buildings impeding the delivery of education. Those are required to be given priority. You'll note that the most recent condition assessment was completed by Bureau Veritas. It deviated from the 2016 methodology and is anticipated to provide you with a 5-year snapshot of your building needs rather than a moment in time.
So Tanya, just real quickly on that front, when we went to a different assessment tool and a different assessment provider, if you will, that did result in some buildings moving positions, and that was because a lot of other factors were included in this new assessment tool. So I just wanted the committee to understand that. For several years, we used the same folks to come out and assess our statewide buildings. In 23, or was it 23 that we
Yep.
we brought in a company called Veritas, and they now do that assessment. And it's a much more robust product, if I might just say in general. And it did result in a couple of buildings moving pretty dramatically up that scale. So you may hear about that. That's in reference to this. I just wanted to expound on that a little bit, Tanya. Thank you.
Very good summary of where we're at today. In the commission's approval of those remedies, they are required to have a most cost-effective remedy. You've heard a lot about that this morning. In those most cost-effective remedies, they're required to ensure that is a delivery of a quality education, that they comply with the statewide adequacy standards, and that those remedies are in the best financial interests of the state. The statewide adequacy standards, you heard the department mention those, and those are required to be reviewed every 4 years. Those include safety, building site requirements, performance standards and guidelines, special needs for children, building capacity that are necessary to deliver the educational program, and technology capacity to meet the educational program. With that, I will turn it over to Mr. Wilmarth.
Mr. Wilmarth, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Just wrapping up this conversation, we kind of discussed this a little bit earlier this morning, is regarding the budget request. School facilities is a little unique in that it's the commission is charged annually to come to this committee and request a budget. And so that budget includes their remedies for both condition and capacity of schools if those rise to the need as identified by the commission. And then any refinements to the projects that have been previously requested and approved. They also include an annual report that Director McComey and Administrator Carlson will discuss as well. And then this committee makes its recommendation to the Joint Appropriations Committee no later than November 1st of each year. And then that follows that more traditional process and is reviewed by the Joint Appropriations Committee. As part of that recommendation from this committee, it also makes that same recommendation to the governor. And so it's kind of a joint effort. The timing on that is to ensure that this committee's recommendation is before the governor's recommendation, so he has time to consider that as part of the overall either biennial budget request or supplemental budget request. Additionally, each of the projects that are recommended are to have a cost associated with each phase of that project, whether it's planning, design, or construction. And then after the appropriations are made, the commission may transfer up to 15% of the funds appropriated between project phases, and that is a report. Then there's an associated reporting and approval requirement as part of that. I think that covers it.
So Matt, real quickly, I believe this select committee was patterned after Select Water, and I believe Select Water also makes an annual budget request. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, that's correct. They are a little bit different in that their recommendation does not go before the Joint Appropriations Committee. They sponsor their own independent legislation, and it follows its process during the session. It doesn't prohibit this committee doing that, but there is that extra phase to communicate the recommendations to the Joint Appropriations Committee.
Yeah, but that is why committee, this is a yearly effort to try to bring forth what is recommended from the commission. So any questions for Tanya and Matt on this front? That was a quick review, so please don't let me hurry everybody through any questions you might have, but we're going to keep chugging, okay? Thank you very much, you guys. And Director, same for you guys. I would just ask that you touch on some things at about a 30,000-foot view. We don't need to expound too long, but anxious to hear from you on the use of funds and process.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Del McComey, Director for the State Construction Department. There was a number of things within where we're going to head this afternoon that kind of overlap some of the stuff that you just heard from LSO, as well as some of the discussions we had this morning. So we'll kind of highlight those really quickly and not go back in depth in them. But we did try, because of the new members on the committee, to give you, I guess, some easy reading stuff if you have a hard time falling asleep at night in the future. So with that.
If you touch on the high points, I'm sure the committee will due diligence between now and August. But Director, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I want to make sure that everyone knows that we will certainly entertain public comment before we close out these next two topics. And so there was an inquiry regarding that. We took public comment before we broke for lunch, and we will do so again after these topics. And so for anyone listening from the outside or anybody in the room, we will take public comment. So please continue. Director,
Okay,
thanks.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to turn it over to Administrator Carlson, and she's going to start walking through this.
Mr. Chairman, we'll start there on page 1 of 16. We just got two different depictions there. One is kind of the Wyoming School Facilities appropriation sequence by step. The second page there just kind of gives it in more of a flow chart layout. But I think what you'll find is that we are, and our department are kind of always in the mix of budgeting. As soon as we walk out of the legislature, we're already working on next year's budget. And so we're kind of always in some phase of that flow chart. With that, I'm going to turn the next topic, facility condition assessment, over to Mr. Rexis.
You're flying at the 30,000-foot view, level 2, right, Mr. Rexis?
That's correct, Mr.
Okay,
Chairman.
good deal.
Agenda item number 8 is the K-12 facility planning and budgeting. The facility condition assessment conducted by Bureau Veritas in 2023 that Mr. Wilmarth was talking about is a forward-looking assessment. Out of that, there were 48,000 individual assets and systems assessed with 50,000 photographs taken. Over 3.8 million data points were captured on 617 buildings. And in this assessment, it also included site-related items, which hasn't previously been considered. The assessment data allows districts and state construction department to plan for the most cost-effective remedy studies based on buildings' 5-year projected facility condition index, which is reviewed each year, and to adjust the FCI scores by building every year for major maintenance and component project work performed, in addition to deficiencies that are coming online. It's a dynamic FCI score that better represents the current building condition. It simplifies cost estimating, budgeting, inflation adjustments, and it provides component lifecycle cost estimates. I am going to forward a link to Mr. Wilmarth before the end of today for a webinar on that assessment. It's kind of a training video for the districts to teach them a little bit about that. And if anybody's interested in watching that webinar, we'll certainly make that available to you.
Okay,
And with
appreciate
that, I'll
John.
stand for any questions you may have.
Thank you, John. Any questions, committee? Okay, please proceed,
Okay,
Director.
back to Shelby.
Back
All
to
right, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Carlson, go ahead.
We're going to talk about the facility plans. These are a collaborative process, as Ms. Hytrek pointed out. We do work very closely with the districts as we prepare their facility plans. We start out with a webinar where we kind of talk about the process and what's going to happen. We then do a pre-meeting with every district if they want it. A lot of these districts have done this so many times, they don't necessarily need a pre-meeting. But we do get a lot of new staff across the district, so we offer a pre-meeting where we sit down, we talk about the process, we answer any questions they may have after they've had a chance to look at their facility plan template, and give them that opportunity and talk about the timing of when we need information from them. And then we actually go into the formal meeting where we walk through every topic in that template and visit with them and add information in. Some key points, a facility plan is really a snapshot in time. It's just the picture at the time that we have that meeting and where they're at. Now, they may be projecting some things that are coming down the road, and those will be mentioned, but these are very dynamic and they can change pretty quickly. They are required every 2 years. We are doing them every year. There's just a lot changes in the district every year with buildings and leases and those types of things. This past year, we shifted the time frame from those, from being in the early winter, like January through March, we shifted those back and are doing them between September and December. That was very well received by the districts, and it really helps us with our budgeting process. We get through those facility plans sooner. We can look at the projects that came through that, comments that we got from the district, and use that to start building our budget for the upcoming year. They do require school facilities commission approval. Just at a very high level, I've got a list of really all the different sections of that. Ms. Hytrek pointed those out too, because they are in statute, so they were in a little more depth than what I've shown here for you. But, we do talk about all their land, how much acreage they've got, are there any plans to dispose of it, acquire new land? Are they leasing land for their own use, or are they leasing some of their land to somebody else? We do the same with buildings. We go in, we look at their square footage. Have there been any changes? We look at plans for disposition or mothballing, which we talked about earlier. We visit about enhancements, their leases, and the condition of those facilities, and are they planning any facility changes in the near future? We look at the capacity. One of the things that we found in some of the Mercers that we've been performing is, as we've got out and started walking these schools, we're looking at the way these rooms are being used, and they don't necessarily align with the profile information that we have in the current facility plans. So this coming, after we do the facility plans, we do want to sit down with the districts and really start walking those schools and making sure that all of those classrooms are properly categorized, because that can affect the capacity of your buildings. So we're going to try to get out and really make a good effort and make sure those profiles are accurate. Major maintenance needs and planned projects are included in there. They're tracked in that program, and it tells kind of the status of where they're at and what the district's doing. We review allowable and excess square footage. We talk about charter schools as appropriate if there is one in their district. I might mention here that we also do a facility plan review with the charter schools. A lot of those discussions really wrap more around just the leasing and them understanding how those leasing payments are coming together, but visit with them about their facilities, any changes they're planning, are they changing configurations or those sorts of things. We talk about capital appropriations and capital projects they may have ongoing. We talk completed projects. And then we do have a section for needs review. So these might be things that the district is struggling with a particular building that maybe isn't being identified through the capacity or the condition lists. And so it gives us the opportunity to talk about those things that might drive a component project for them that we might otherwise not pick up with the information that we have. The other thing, I just kind of took a snapshot of a small piece of the major maintenance portion. I think it just gives you an idea of what type of things we're seeing there. Those major maintenance projects are all recorded. And sometimes it may say, hey, we've got a work order already. We're already working on this. Some of these projects may take a couple of years. Their major window is the summer when the students are out. So they may carry those over from year to year for a while. And we can see what the deferred maintenance cost is. And it might be something that, when we look at ceiling finishes and some of those sort of things, that they're just kind of watching them. They might be going in, or carpets, they might be going in and doing 3 or 4 rooms a year because they know they're coming due, but they're not immediate urgency, even though maybe the condition is dropping. So that's very, very quick, high-level view. If there's any questions about the facility planning process.
Any questions on facility planning? Representative, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to make
I
this
was
quick.
confused by the senator there, but
He was trying to
he
get you.
would just, yeah, there you go.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Representative Garrett, take it away.
And I'm going to backtrack just a little bit. The facility condition assessment and this planning process that you do. I've tried, I apologize, being new, I'm still learning kind of the ropes here, and in looking through the website and trying to find, say, an overall compilation of all of this data, all of this information that the general public or we as legislators, do you have that available on your website?
We did have the facility plans up there. You will still find those facility plans on there. This year's have not been approved yet by our commission. We're supposed to be a staff of 3, and we've been a staff of 1 a good portion of this time, and then we do not have all of those plans completed yet. But once they are there, they are uploaded and available on our website.
So Representative Geringer, does that answer your question? Or were you talking about the condition and capacity indices that list each one of our buildings out across?
Well, actually, that would be an additional question, but yes, that's a good add-on.
Director McCombie?
Yeah,
do you wanna
Mr. Chairman, we'll talk about that a little bit later in more detail, but that would be in the annual plan. So if you go to the annual plan, which you'll get a copy of, and it's like 104 pages last year, so it's pretty detailed. It'll show building by building what all those scores are and you know, how many folks are in the building and that kind of stuff in that annual plan, so pretty detailed.
That's a good reminder, Director and Representative, that there's a little snapshot provided in our packet, as you know, because I can tell you've been through it all, but that every building committee, you should be able to go directly to that specific building if it's in your district, and you'll know exactly what the score is on that building, so. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I might add just one more point to Representative's question, and that's that if you look at the first topic we talked, there was facility condition assessment. If you go then to the second page on the facility planning and you look at the second column in that major maintenance portion and you see the condition score, that will be a 1 through a 5. 1 and 2 are those that are poor or failing and in tough condition. So you see these were all 2s, but that information comes, that score comes from the facility condition assessment. So the 2 feed each other.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman.
go ahead, Representative.
Thank you, and I appreciate that, and really it's being able to, you know, we've heard some feedback from folks in Laramie County about being able to be part of the process and having the information and just trying to make sure that we have all of that available to folks and where we can direct them to as well, not just for our own purposes in these kind of packets, but kind of the comprehensive look as well. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Representative Geringer, that's an excellent question and very well placed. I mean, I think it's incumbent upon us to be able to do that. So thank you for clarifying. And I know the department's going to do everything they can to get this information up, as they always do. So, Director, take it away.
Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Oh,
Point of order
Senator
real
Smith,
fast.
you bet.
This is actually just a clarification. I've known Rob for over 30 years, and he's too nice to say anything, but most of the room has been mispronouncing his name. It's Geringer, like Ringer. It's easy because it's like you think
I
Derringer.
did put a J in there, didn't
But
I?
it's Geringer. Anyway, just, you know, it's not a huge deal, but it is his name, so thank you.
Thank you for the correction, and that's the first and only time I've done that today. I didn't mean to. So, Director, please take it away.
Okay, Shelby?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to turn this one over to Mr. John Rexis.
I have John's name down.
Mr. Chairman, next agenda item is on the component project process. The purpose of component funding is to supplement major maintenance funds when district funds are inadequate to remedy low-scoring deficient systems. As you heard earlier, sometimes these bigger ticket items and components like roofs or mechanical systems far surpass a district's ability to cover with their accumulated major maintenance, especially in the smaller districts, but not unique to them either, because the larger districts have more square footage to take care of as well. They just have a little more flexibility to do that. The State Construction Department utilizes the information from the district facility plans and the statewide facility condition assessment that projects current and future deficiencies for component systems within a school building, such as mechanical systems, roofing, plumbing, and that sort of thing. All the projects that are submitted for component level funding must qualify for regular major maintenance expenditures in accordance with Wyoming Statute 2115-109. And the way we're looking at the prioritization on that is every year in the facility planning meetings, the districts submit to us a list of projects that they intend to address. Some of those projects are rather large ticket items, and we have conversations with the district about those in regards to when they think those systems are going to come to an end, how soon they need funding, and whether or not they're capable of covering those costs with their existing major maintenance balance. So we take a look at those district facility plans, we compile a list of projects, and then we go about prioritizing those projects based on information that comes out of that facility condition assessment, along with what the existing and projected major maintenance balances are for these districts. That kind of gives us what we like to call the deficiency funding index to identify the prioritization of those projects and which ones we need to address to put on that list for the budget request. And the way we create that deficiency funding index is we take all of their current existing deficiencies and 3 years of projected deficiencies that are coming up, and we divide that by the balance of their major maintenance account currently, along with 3 years of what the anticipated funding is going to be for major maintenance. That has a tendency to vary year to year, depending on what RS means assigns as a replacement cost value.
Like say what RS means is.
Sorry. RS means is kind of a national database and costing book that breaks out the different components and systems and what they should cost by region, as well as what the replacement cost values are for entire buildings within that area. So once we have that, then it's a little easier for us to take a look at the districts that have the highest need and the districts that have the most urgent need, and we try to address the projects that could potentially have the highest impact on the delivery of education and operations.
So John, that process was modified a little bit. Can you talk a little bit about that? In years gone by, we broke the state up into quadrants, and we had representatives who contributed to the development of this component list. It's not quite that way anymore, right? It's more driven at the agency level to.
Excellent question, Mr. Chairman, and you are correct. Previously, and prior to the 2023 condition assessment, districts would all submit projects that they felt were qualified for and that they had a need for to request component level budget funding. And then a committee that consisted of many different regional district representatives as well as members from the department would score those based on a matrix and a weighting to help determine what that priority was. As we all know, we were a little late in getting the funding and a little late rolling out that condition assessment because it was a shift in methodology and we wanted to make sure that we got it right. And all of the data and information that year dropped shortly before the budget request. In fact, we were trying to use some of that data to help prioritize that, but we did not have at that point in time a prioritized list through the old methodology that we could submit. And we determined that it would be most appropriate for us to use the assessment information along with the existing major maintenance balances to determine what districts had the highest need. And so we kind of shifted to that, but the intent, I think, was always that we wanted to have more collaboration with our school districts and our facility managers. These guys have boots on the ground every day. They work on their buildings, and they know their buildings better than anybody could know them. And so as we're working through this, our intent is to get back to where we're including them in that process and hearing their voices and still using some of this information in regards to their major maintenance balances and what the report is saying and how many deficiencies are coming up in the future to determine how to prioritize those. We just haven't gotten all the way back there yet. We have had a meeting with the facility managers, and we've explained where we want to be and where we want to get to. So we're working through that process right now to get back. But I would say that the first year, we didn't have time to collaborate with the districts on this. What we discovered was that what we picked out and what we thought was the highest priority based on the highest need that would provide the district the most relief wasn't always the highest priority within the district. That they felt like some of these systems and components that had maybe outlasted or outlived their life expectancy were still in relatively good condition and were still running strong. And as long as there's some system redundancy there that wasn't going to affect their operations, that they could continue using those systems and that we would keep an eye on them. But if a district had a higher priority that was going to affect operations, we would allow them to supplant that on that request for the budget. So that's kind of where we're at right now. We're verifying and confirming what we find through the data with the districts. But I think also in the future, we'd like to open up that process a little bit sooner to include the districts and be more collaborative about what their prioritization of projects were and also the justification for the project in order to prioritize that list and bring forward a budget request that would help the districts that were in the greatest need.
Sounds like a little bit of a hybrid type program, and it makes a lot of sense, John. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Anything further on components?
Only if you have more questions, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions? Representative Rob, are you okay? I'm going to be real careful. Sorry about that.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, Mr. Chairman.
Take it away.
Just a little bit of history on this too for the committee. I know some of the members that have been on there for quite a few years kind of understand this, but prior to my coming in as director in, previous director, I guess in 2015, we didn't really have much of a robust program for component projects. And so what we were finding is we were getting a whole bunch of emergency funding requests to the commission saying, hey, this is breaking or whatever. And so we had a much more robust emergency fund, and we were using it a lot more often. We still have an emergency fund, but we're not using it quite as much as we did in the past. And so a good example of what kind of drove where we're at today, and I've used this with the commission and legislators in the past, is Saratoga High School. So in Saratoga, the high school's HVAC system was deteriorating. When it was built some 30 years before, all the system, instead of being piping, was a fiberboard. It was totally disintegrating. And so in the case of trying to replace that for that Saratoga High School, if we'd have if the district would have saved all of its major maintenance funds that came through the formula for 10 years and didn't work on another building or do any other major maintenance work for 10 years, still didn't have enough money to replace that. That's the dollars in some of these bigger systems. So at that point, we worked with this committee to say, hey, how can we solve that type of a situation? So we really stood up a much more robust component project funding mechanism to try and take care of those. And then this last year, what we looked at, we actually listed like 7 different charts for this imbalance between major maintenance and the work that they would need to do with the available major maintenance dollars they had. And what we focused on was educational buildings, because it went from all buildings they have to educational or transportation or whatever. We looked at educational buildings, was our priority. And then those items that were identified in the facility condition assessment, that if they broke or went down, they'd have to shut down school. So if something was coming up with the heating system or something like that during the school year, this district would literally have to shut school. And that's the priorities that we put to try and bring that down. And as we're bringing that down with those systems, it allows the districts not to use their major maintenance dollars. So we're focused on trying to bring those districts that were most out of alignment with what we're projecting they have coming over that three-year time period versus how many dollars they have available. And those kind of rose to that top list. And that's where we're kind of at today and working through in the future on this.
Thank you, Director. Appreciate it. Committee, any questions? Please keep going, Ms. Carlson.
All right.
We at least have Mercer's coming up, or,
Mr. Chairman, we're going to talk about condition and capacity schedules.
all right, here we go.
All right, you heard Ms. Hytrek talk about the requirement that we create these two schedules every year. And so we'll talk first about our condition schedule. We have a term we call FCI, that stands for a Facility Condition Index. And one important, since we just talked about components, I want to give a little differentiation now as we're looking at FCI scores. Components, we're looking at 3 years of deferred major component deficiencies. On the condition schedule, we're looking at 5 years of deficiencies that are coming. So we're looking at that value of 5 years of deficiencies, and we divide that by the current replacement value of the facility. And if that goes above a 0.3 factor, it triggers us to go in and say, we're going to go in and do a most cost-effective remedy and try to determine what's happening with that building and what's driving the increase in that score. The reason we look at 5 years out, that gives us time to go in and do the planning Mercer study. If we have to design a fix, it gives us time to get through that design, get through the construction before that school would really have a major problem. So we do look at this for all educational and non-educational facilities, and it is within our annual report. Every year, you'll see those scores for every facility, educational and non-educational, 2 different lists every year. So then I'll talk a little about the capacity schedule. We look at capacity, we use the enrollment data that we get from the Wyoming Department of Education for the October 1 enrollment of the previous year for the educational buildings in the state. So we update this annually. We talked a little earlier about enrollment and enrollment projections. We use a cohort process of looking what was in the grade before and then projecting that forward and watch what's happening across the state and within that district. So we look at by configuration, we'll look at a district and understand, say, what their K-6 enrollment is doing across the district on a whole, and then we apply that rate of change to each individual school in that district that aligns with that configuration. And then we project that out. Here we're projecting out 8 years. And when we see that number hit 100% out 8 years, that's when we're going to move in to looking at a Mercer study, most cost-effective remedy. What do we need to do? Are those enrollments going to continue to grow the way we're projecting? And what's going to be the fix? This is probably, if it's really capacity issue, probably going to be a capital construction project of maybe we got to add classrooms, right? So we look at 8 years, gives us time to do that Mercer study, do a more in-depth, longer-term design, and then get it constructed before they should hit that 8-year value of 100%. What I'd like to say right now is what we're seeing is statewide, we are declining in enrollment, and almost all districts are. And I'll kind of point that out when we get to another couple of these chart. So I've given you a couple of just examples. If you look at page 7 of 16, this is the first page of the condition index sheet for educational buildings that was in our annual report last year. And you will see how it prioritizes based on the school score there. So you can see the top one is Hobbs Elementary at a 0.464 FCI score. We earlier went through the budget request. You see we are going to make a request for design and construction for Hobbs Elementary with our request this coming year. Any item that has a Mercer column and has a star in there means that we do have a Mercer ongoing for that particular facility. So that kind of is a look at the condition index sheet. Is there any questions before I move on to the capacity schedule? Okay, so the next graph I have there, page 8 of 16, is actually the first page of our capacity schedule from last year's annual report. And you'll see those schools that are projected to be above 100% out 8 years in 2032. Again, if you take a look at these numbers, you'll see, I think, virtually in every case except the Shoshone Learning Center, which is school number 5, you'll see a decrease from where they're at now to where they're going. So most of these are decreasing. And we were watching Shoshone Learning Center. There, it is an alternative school. They tend to fluctuate quite a bit. They're down to 20 students this year. So not at capacity any longer. And so we have this for every educational building in the state. We produce it every year. So are there any questions on that list before I move on?
I don't see any questions, so please keep going.
All right. So page 9 of 16 is just showing you what our enrollment projections are statewide. That top chart includes the charter school students. So that is with charter schools. Page 10 of 16 shows you that graph without the charter school students included. And then I might point out, these are statewide. We do these district-wide, but we can also do this for each individual school on what we're projecting for that school. And then if you look at page 11 of 16, this is our charter school only projections, and you can see that the charter schools are growing. If we go to page 12 of 16, this is district brick and mortar enrollment. So these are the students that are actually in the classrooms. This excludes virtual students. So they're not included in this graph that I have here. And of course, those are the students that we're looking at to determine capacity of those that are actually in the school. You'll see we've got 9 districts, charters statewide are well above. We've got 2019 in there, which was our last pre-COVID year. 2020 was our COVID year. And so we've gone clear back to 2019. So those that are shown in green have actually come back to their pre-COVID enrollments and gone a little above them. That list was actually 9 districts last year. We're down to 8 districts this year that are actually at pre-COVID numbers. Flat, Park 16, which is Meeteetse, they're the only one they're right at where they were pre-COVID. Last year, we had 3 that were right at 100%, so we've lost 2 more out of there. And so this year, we've got 39 districts that are still below their pre-COVID numbers, and that is up 3 districts from last year. One thing I might just point out that you can kind of look down through and look at the different districts, but if you compare the 2023 enrollment column to the 2024 enrollment column, you can really see where those districts are dropping, and in general, most of them are. This is a nationwide thing. It's nationwide. The enrollment projections in schools are dropping. Mostly related to, in general, birth rates are dropping. People having less kids. Statewide, from last year to this year, we have lost 1,130 students out of our brick and mortar buildings. So those are the graphs I wanted to go through that just kind of supported the condition and capacity lists and schedules. I'd take any questions.
I think we're good, and the committee can certainly visit those at any point in time. We'll keep chugging along here. Director, did you have something you wanted to add to that, or let's go on to Mercer's
Okay.
and finish up? That'd be good.
All right. Most cost-effective remedy studies, I'll go over this at a real high level. It is a most cost-effective remedy study. So we're going to go in, we're going to look at the condition that drove that. It can be driven by 3 different situations. It can be driven by condition of that facility, capacity of that facility, or adequacy. If we've had a school district come in and say, you know, we can't deliver the educational program because of X, Y, and Z. The districts used to be in control of these studies. That has now moved over to the department. And we do collaborate with the districts all the way through this process. So we're getting to finally where we think we've got a draft report and a draft decision where we think we're headed. We're going to meet right with the district and talk through it with them and get input from them before we move on. So they're going to be well involved before we get to a final report that we want to carry before their board of trustees. You'll see that lists of 1 through 12 are all the different items that we consider as we're looking at most cost-effective remedy. One of the things I might point out is, as we look at these, there are a number of different options that can come out of these and already have the ones that we're doing. First option you may see is a do nothing. And we've had one of our Mercer studies come out as a do nothing. A couple reasons: we had some mistakes that had been in on the configuration of the school, had been in there since it opened many years ago, and we had it set as a K3 and it was actually a 4-6. Well, a K3 is a 1:16 student-to-teacher ratio, and a 4-6 is a 25-to-1 student-teacher ratio. So the minute we fixed that number, it corrected itself up. In addition, that district had already gone in and done their own projection enrollments and hired a consultant to do that. That district is dropping in enrollment by our calculations as well as by their own consultants' calculations. So that one came back as a do nothing. You may say a component level only project, which the director mentioned, Lincoln 2's transportation facility. When we got in and really looked at that, there were 3 major components that really needed to be fixed. It was much more cost-effective and efficient to just go fix those 3 systems. That was still a good facility. So you might see a component level project. You may see an addition to a school come out if it's capacity, and you may see a renovation and or a replacement. So there's really 5 different options that can come out of these studies. Upon the completion of the evaluation and our coordination with the district, we're going to put forward a formal recommendation on what the most cost-effective remedy is. What I would say is there's really the most cost-effective remedy. We're trying to zero in on that one. Now, as we talked about East High School, we're looking at additions there, but there are a number of different places you could put on an addition. But the most cost-effective is to do an addition to that school. The Mercer is really the highest advantage. Really, we go in and we look at all the advantages to the school from an educational standpoint, advantages to that building. We look at trying to maximize those advantages at the least amount of cost. So we pull that report together, we go before the Board of Trustees. If the Board of Trustees concurs in the results of our study and they approve it or concur in it, it moves forward to our commission for review and approval at their discretion. If the district disagrees with what we've come out as, they can ask for an informal review. They have 30 days to write that informal review up and write why they believe that what we have identified as the most cost-effective remedy is not. And that goes before our director to make a decision on what he believes is the most cost-effective remedy. There's not a time limit on that because depending on how extensive that is, he may have to go gather a lot of data and other information to really review that. Once that decision is made from the informal review, if it aligns with the district, then we carry that recommendation forward. If it doesn't yet align with what the district feels it should be, we're going to make the department's recommendation. We're going to also include what the district's recommendation is when we go to present it to the commission. The district can come in and support their position, and then it goes to our commission to make a decision. And that is the final action on that most cost-effective remedy. Now, the commission does have the ability to come back in at a later date and change that if they elect to for whatever reason. So that's what I wanted to cover with most cost-effective remedies, and I take any questions.
Okay. Any questions on Mercer? Representative Geringer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we see in the data that we've got the declining enrollment that is factored into the Mercer study, but then how is that applied then in the actual design of these facilities? Are you planning for continued declining enrollment and so therefore smaller facilities? Are you keeping it flat, or how are you handling that?
Mr. Chairman, that is a good question. And this declining enrollment has made it more difficult for us to really project out. So here is what we're doing. We do not believe that Wyoming will continue to decline like these projections are showing us for the long haul. The last thing we want to do is come in and build a school way too small, right? That would not be good. So what we're doing is we're looking back 5 years, and then we're looking at our projections going forward, and we're picking the highest value. And in general, that is a value behind us, so a year ago or 2 years ago, and we're using that value. And when we look at a facility and we're building a new facility, we build it to be at 90% capacity when it opens. Again, we don't want to open a brand-new facility or an addition at 100%. So we look at building it at 90%. So that's the value we're using. We're looking at the highest value we have, and then we're building at that value at 90% capacity. So building for that extra 10%. Good question.
Senator Smith?
Mr. Chair, along those lines, is there any way to adjust that? So I remember Saddle Ridge, I'm looking at it, it's at capacity, it's at 116 capacity. But I remember when it opened, I was talking to the principal at the time, and he said, "Oh, Mr. Smith, we're over capacity, and it's first day." And I said, "Well, who built this building then? It should be twice as big," because it was obviously the community, it was the only place that the community could grow, and there was construction everywhere. And so I'm wondering, like, what's the max, well, a couple of things. How do we adjust that? And then what's the max size you can have for an elementary school before it's too big? Like, how do we adjust the standards? So like, knowing that they were going to be at capacity by the time they opened, I mean, maybe it was 90 when the ground broke, but like, I'm just thinking that just seems to be a flaw in the way we build.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Ms. Carlson.
So the things we have talked about with the couple Mercers that we have completed recently, that being Campbell County High School as well as Sweetwater High School, they do live in areas that are strongly affected by our energy sector. If we're in the design process and we can see things turning around, we're looking out 8 years. So we've got some time. If we can see that's changing while we're going through the design, we're going to recorrect and fix that during the design. If we still can't foresee that, when a facility opens or they hit that 100%, we go in and respond pretty quick with the addition of modular facilities, which certainly costs money to go in and set those facilities up and make sure they've got the infrastructure and the water and the restrooms and those sorts of things. But that's how we come in and address those until we can come in and put a permanent fix in, so those are temporary. And so that's how we try to adjust on the fly if we need to.
So Senator, frustrating. Yeah, very frustrating. That particular school was on the radar screen as one of the frustrating ones, but it is inexact. That the adjustment would come, we could certainly do that. This committee just modified that. I'm trying to think, 5 years ago, Senator Rothfuss, or was it more than that? Yeah, I do that at home too. Several years ago, we modified it so that we project out further than we used to.
Yeah.
And I forget what we've got it at now. I think it's 10, right?
8 years.
It's 8?
Yeah.
Okay. But it's an inexact science. Go ahead, Director.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, one of the other modifications that were made, not only extending that out further in the future for the look to get more time, but the other thing that was looked at is before, we were not doing anything until we hit 100%. So we were right up against the wall and then reacting to it. And so what we've done in adding those additional years is to give us that longer time period that we're looking forward. So we know by the data that's transpiring where we should be, hopefully, at that point in time.
So
And that
we-
goes, Senator, that goes into what the director pointed out earlier today. We've learned from those past situations that Cowley Elementary School was the first one that happened. We finished a brand-new building, and it was over capacity the minute the kids walked in. We began to understand we've got to do something different, but hope that makes sense. Go ahead.
No, it's
Senator,
good.
follow up.
So,
Yeah.
do we build our elementary schools so we can put a second floor? Because actually, so that school I mentioned, we could just put a second floor and make that thing twice as big because it's still there's still construction going on all around it. And it was 15 years ago that it was at capacity when it opened.
Mr. Chairman, the other thing, and I mentioned this a little earlier this morning, where we want to come in and take a look at and modify the projection enrollment view that we're doing. Because again, if you look at those numbers, what we're doing right now is your cohort studies. The number of students in, say, that are coming up in, say, the 4th, 5th grade, 6th grade, that will hit that 7th, 8th grade school. So what's that looking like? Are those trending down also? Do we have just a bubble coming through, those sort of things? So the new modifications that we want to look at, for example, in Jackson and some of those that we're doing Mercers on right now, is what is the birth rate in that community? Add that to it. Who's coming that way? We're looking at, they actually looked at the number of people moving into the community and where are they coming from, as well as the number of people that are moving out of that community and where are they going to, which was fairly interesting to see where folks are coming into Teton County from and that sort of thing. So again, there'll be, instead of just relying on this single graph, there's 5 different metrics that we would be looking at to try and give us a better forecasting tool.
Good question. Good job. Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So looking at the number of students per teacher ratio for the model versus how the Mercer, how you calculate that, it's my understanding that typically we would want a 16-to-1 for K through 6, and then 21-to-1 for 7 through 12. And I think you're doing the 16-to-1 for K through 3, and then for grades 4 plus 25-to-1. And so my question is why, but then how are we kind of making sure that we're fitting within that constitutionality of what we decide a quality classroom size should be?
Mr. Chairman, so that 16-to-1, we'll start there, came in a number of years ago, and it was actually in statute at one point. And the commission went through and we adopted it into our rules and regulations at 16-to-1 for K3. Subsequent to that, it came back out of statute. When we went back through and tried to pull it out of our rules and regs and our capacity methodology, there was a lot of public outcry. And so when we went through all those public hearings on those rule changes, the department and the commission at that time decided to retain the K through 3 16-to-1 ratio. And now, to my understanding, we've been 25-to-1. As long since I was here before, which was in 16 to 18, we've been that 25-to-1. I can't answer the question on why we haven't gone to 21-to-1, but we've been 25-to-1 for a number of years. Now, one other thing I might mention is we're going to look at a classroom. If it'll hold 20 kids, but it's capped or restricted at 16:1, we're only going to consider capacity of that room at 16 students. That doesn't mean the district might elect to put 17 or 18 in there if they need to, especially if they got these bubbles going through. We're still going to restrict it at 16:1. The whole school's that way. You're going to see that in the capacity methodology, that we're going to say they're over capacity.
Okay, Senator Rothfuss.
Yeah, a quick follow-up on that. And, I remember when we had the potential rule change, when it was, in statute, there was an express requirement for 16:1 instead of the model funding for 16:1. So that express requirement was removed. I think that was a bad decision, but we did that. And that led to the potential for the rule change. And so that was worked through, and it was left for the K through 3. The funding model, though, still theoretically funds all K-6 classrooms at 16:1. Now, we know that we don't pay enough for the teacher salaries to achieve that. So in those grades, we get an average of 19:1. And then in 7 through 12, the funding model funds 21:1, and we get an average of 23 based on the fact that the teacher's salaries are insufficient to cover it. But I do think there's a concern if somehow magically, and it would take magic, a district were to be able to hire the right number of teachers to achieve the 16:1 that we're funding through the model for K-6, they wouldn't have enough classrooms because of the way that we calculate the capacity, and they wouldn't be able to prove to school construction that they don't have enough capacity, because you would say, well, we calculate those at a 25 cap. So I do think there's a mismatch there. And I say that going as we're in recalibration, and we're working on exactly that, trying to get to the point where classrooms could be at the correct size. So I do see the possibility, once again, of us coming into conflict where the capacity calculation and our classroom caps end up coming into conflict with the funding model, which, were it to provide sufficient funds, does have a desire for K-6 classroom sizes of 16:1. So I guess my question then is, what do we do if we solve the problem?
Because some of those elementary schools out there, Director, we didn't think about adding on to them years and years ago.
Yep.
So now I'll let you answer the question.
Well, there's one of two things. You either do additions or you build more schools. And I think that's really a policy decision for the state, because it's, again, I came in 15, and it was that way, I know, well before I was here, on those numbers of students in a classroom. And so that's how it's been set up. That's how the schools have been built. So as you mentioned, what you have is a difference in the funding model versus how we, the state, have been building schools for the number of students in a classroom. The other thing to keep in mind is you have the opposite of what Director or Administrator Carlson was saying, in that it depends, there's so many, so from an education standpoint, and that's how we factor in the size of the room, is there's so many square feet per student also in there. So those rooms aren't undersized because we figure so many square feet per student in that room. But you could have a room, for example, that's 12,000 square feet, and we have such rooms out there, and it might be a K-12, and it only needs 800 square feet on the kindergarten and less than that on the higher grades, and we still cap that at that. So there is more room in those schools for the room itself, for the number of students in there in many cases, than what we are looking at from a capacity standpoint, or driving that need for an addition or a new school.
Senator, go ahead.
Yeah, and one other thing that is built in, you mentioned the cohort survival model that we do, which is the appropriate model, but one thing that it takes into consideration, I think we've had this conversation before, is it requires that a certain number of your high school students drop out of high school, right? We build that into the capacity sizing on the cohort survival projection for high school. So if somehow, again, waving the magic wand, you had a 100% graduation rate, your high school would be too small. And, you know, that's another concern. I assume same answer, which is that if we solve that problem, we've got a school facilities problem. Is that fair?
Yeah, we certainly would. So let's just take the scenario of you limit the number of students at 16 to 1 all the way across. So when we would do our calculations, we would figure, we'd cap every one of those rooms now that were the 25 to 1s. We would cap them at 16, even though they'd hold 25 by our design methodology. We would cap it at 16, and therefore that chart would change trajectory from you have available seats to now you maybe don't have available seats in there.
And by the way, Senator, if you could solve those two problems, you'll be up for legislative committee of the year within CSL. How about that?
Yeah.
There you go. Director, thank you. That I believe takes us to the end of this topic. Does it not? What else you got?
Yeah,
And then we want to go to
Mr. Chairman, I have just a real short, because most of what I was going to talk about here has already been covered. But we talked about, this is really dealing with the annual report and the budget requests. We already kind of talked through bringing this to you all in the August meeting, both the annual report and the budget request. So the information that was just presented on conditions and capacities and all of those sort of things are in that annual report. The budget is in there, the 680 request function that details how every district spends all of their major maintenance dollars. All of that stuff is in that annual report. And again, that annual report last year was about 104 pages long. So any details you want are there. That stuff's all on our website also. So, if you want to access that way. And in many cases, the history even beyond that is in there. So the annual report, even though we call it the new annual report, it has some of these same charts. So it goes back 4 and 5 years to show you what a lot of these trends are and kind of where we're headed. So, and with that, Mr. Chairman, I think everything we've talked about is pretty well covered already. So
I think so. Committee, anything? Director, thank you. I'm going to allow for some public comment on what we've covered thus far this afternoon. And then we have one more topic for those listening in from outside the room. We'll talk about use of funds briefly this afternoon as our final topic. But in the meantime, if we have any public comment, I would welcome it based on all of the information just provided by our staff and by our agency. Ashley, anybody out there with a hand up?
Oh, just now, you wished it into fruition. Superintendent Chapman from Teton 1 is online.
Okay, let's get the superintendent in here. Certainly want to get any thoughts she has this afternoon, so. Superintendent, good afternoon, welcome. If you would be formal and introduce yourself for the record.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Gillian Chapman. I'm the superintendent in Teton County. And I'm not entirely sure where my testimony fits. So I'm going to be brief and cover maybe 2 things. And if you tell me I'm in the wrong spot, then I'll shut up and I'll wait. But I have 2 comments that I'd like to make. And one is I really appreciate the director and Administrator Carlson in attempting to support Teton County and our Mercer requests. We're eager to begin construction of a secure vestibule at Jackson Hole High School, as well as the addition and renovation to enable us to offer the basket of goods as required by the state and accommodate increased enrollment due to housing. And I appreciate Senator Smith's comments that we're always in the arrears. And it is not a nimble process to go through a Mercer, nor is a nimble process to construct a facility. So in my humble opinion, I believe in some communities where you can expect growth due to a variety of factors, that waiting until 90 or opening a building at 90% or waiting till a building is at 100% capacity before you make any consideration, you're already 2 years behind the 8 ball. So I would urge the select committee and the department to make a change in that area. The second comment I'd like to make is Teton County School District is formally requesting immediate funding in order to bring the SF 62 that was signed into law on March 3rd in order to bring our building into compliance. As soon as that law was signed, we immediately assessed our facilities, and we have one building, Summit Innovations High School, that only has multi-stall restrooms and does not have a single stall restroom. And thus we are unable to offer a reasonable accommodation as stated in Senate File 62. And we're scrambling to follow this unfunded mandate. As you're aware, the penalties for non-compliance are steep. I'm a rule follower, and I am very, very concerned that we are putting our district at risk due to this unfunded mandate. And I'm sure when this went into effect, that probably was assumed that there was a reasonable accommodation in all facilities, but that is just not the case in our school district. So we immediately and respectfully request funding to design and construct a single stall restroom so that we may be in compliance with the law, especially by the time school opens in August of 2025. For summer school, we are able to use a different facility to ensure that our visitors and our students have access to an appropriate, reasonable accommodation. And we do already have a preliminary design. We just need the funding to get started on it. And with that, I would stand for any questions that you may have for me.
Superintendent, do you have an estimate on what that restroom facility would cost?
Thank you, Chairman. We did have an architect and an engineer come and assess the facility, and their most effective remedy is to remove the water fountain in between the male and the female multi-stall restroom. Their design fee is $12,000, and generally that is approximately 10%. The design fee is approximately 10% of construction. So I would say that we could do the design and construction not to exceed 150, 175, but we don't have a real solid estimate until you have the design done. We really don't have a way of knowing what a reasonable estimate would be.
Okay, thank you. Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think my question follow-up to that goes to the commission, because we can't allocate funds by the start of the next school year as the legislature. So then does the commission have the emergency funds for that? Are there other schools that have requested this and are not going to be able to follow the law based on what we wrote in Senate File 62?
Good question, Representative. Director, thank you for coming forward.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have two avenues we're exploring right at this point in time. One is the emergency funding that the commission has available, and have spoken with the chairman on that. The other is through the governor's emergency fund. And we've got a meeting set up with policy folks for next week to talk about which direction do we want to go, because quite frankly, we don't know how big this issue may or may not be.
Thank you, Director. Committee, we did pass the law, and it seems to me that we'd better find a remedy on this deal. I would just say this, and I hopefully speak on behalf of the committee, Director, if you would keep us posted, but I would encourage that we try to do anything we can for a school that needs to abide by the law with a modification like this, expensive though it is.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and so on the commission side, I think we've got a little over $4 million in emergency funds still available in that pot. Again, it's something that doesn't revert. We just, there's money allocated to that. We use it, and then every so often we'll request some additional funding.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Representative, go
follow,
ahead.
it sounds like you don't know exactly how many schools might be impacted by this, but do you have a number of schools that have approached you about this concern?
One.
Director, okay.
Yeah, we just learned of this from our visits recently with Teton One, and so that's why we're trying to figure out a fix and try and meet the accommodations for the timetable that Superintendent mentioned.
Okay. Thank you, Director. Appreciate it. Superintendent, thank you for weighing in this afternoon. It's good to see you.
Thank you.
All righty, take care.
Thank you, sir.
Do we have any further public comment? Any further public comment? Please come forward.
So, Mr.
Afternoon.
Chairman, Troy Decker, Facilities Director for Sheridan County School District 2. With regard to component funding, to give a little bit of history, and Mr. Chairman will remember this back in the day of Ken Darrier, Director, and there was a lot of collaboration with school districts across the state. It used to be called major capital and minor capital. And minor capital were meeting those needs. And at one point, minor capital went away. And there was not enough money out there for major maintenance to take care of these things such as $1 million roofs and HVAC systems and stuff like that. So back in, I've been a facilities director twice. This is my second position in the school district as that. As I'm in Sheridan County School District, I can count at least 5 projects that are $1 million plus $2 million, one in one aspect, a $2 million project, and we get $3 million a year. And so I just want to continue to thank the commission and you for supporting those component projects. I know there's a prioritization process. We respect that. But those are very important funds that allow us then to deal with a lot of other things that actually impact the building, but also have additional educational impact on students. So I just wanted to kind of continue to remind you of the importance of that support.
Such an important point. So thank you for making it. I think it always feels like, when we get into the legislative process committee, it feels like that's an extra. Here we are with our major maintenance funding, but now we've got this appendage that we call component funding. Well, that's the reason it is so important, because it really does address things that our major maintenance funding can't reach. And so I hope that we will always take that under consideration and continue to push a list forward, because it makes a big difference. So appreciate you. Thank you. Any questions for Sheridan 2? Okay. Further public comment? Any other comment? Okay, we'll close public comment, and quickly, we're not going to spend much time on this next one, or the committee might leave. So we do want to touch on this. Representative Bratton, did you have something? No. Oh, okay. Matt, please come forward. Let's get started on this one. And thank you, Catherine, for your work. Excellent work. I don't want to, by any means, diminish the effort. We do have a good report, and I know that everybody read it. But Mr. Wilmarth, Catherine, we'll get to you in a second, or if you want to take it and run, or.
Yeah, Mr.
Go
Chairman,
ahead,
I'm going to open up, but I'll let Catherine introduce herself as well. Again, for the record, Matt Wilmarth, LSO Senior School Finance Analyst.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. Catherine Camerati, LSO Budget Fiscal.
And Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, just a little bit of backdrop for this topic. In the Senate, at least, there was quite a robust discussion during the session on the use of school district funds. As you know, the legislature is responsible, or the primary entity responsible for the financing of school capital construction and major maintenance. However, school districts do enhance their facilities beyond the statewide adequacy standards. And they do that through various forms of financing. And so today, this memo illustrates where those revenue sources may come from, and it provides some context surrounding some methodologies that were provided in 2017 to the Select Committee on School Finance Recalibration. And then Catherine will provide some historical information on school district transfers of funds and expand upon what Senate File 156, expenditure of state funds on K-12 public schools, would have done if enacted into law. So just to set the stage, when we talk about local school district enhancements to school buildings and facilities, as I indicated, those are beyond what the state's statewide adequacy standards are. And most people think of these, I think the most big example of this is a school that has a pool within it. The state doesn't build pools, but school districts have built pools. And there's various ways that districts can do that. But pools are maybe the prime example, but there's also school districts that enhance buildings for the ceiling height, or they want additional CTE space, career technical education space, or they want more track space, et cetera. And so it's just not athletics oriented. And so I just wanted to set that as a basis. So the first, go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Gamrot, you'll touch on what Senate File 156, what that was all about, right? Because that, as you know, committee became one of our interim topics. And so I
Mr. Chairman, absolutely.
thank you, Catherine. We'll get to you here in a minute, but please conclude, Mr. Wilmarth. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No worries. So the first item I have in kind of the list of potential revenue sources that districts can tap into is major maintenance. Under the current law, Wyoming Statute 2115-109 subsection F, the legislature has allowed school districts to maintain enhancements as long as their facility plan needs have been addressed first. And the district is allowed to use up to 10% of their major maintenance allocation to maintain those enhancements. The district's facility or proposed expenditures also have to be approved by the state construction department. The increase in the cost replacement value multiplier, the 2 to 2.5% that was enacted into law, will provide additional funding for those enhancements to be maintained. I just want to reiterate that it's a function of 8%. So more money will be allowed to be utilized for that purpose. On top of page 2 of this memo is special reserve funds. And within this, I do have a potential policy consideration that this committee may want to address. But school districts are allowed to establish special reserve funds. And those purposes can vary. And it could be for purposes of purchasing or replacing specified equipment, a depreciation reserve for equipment, or school building repair. The districts can establish these under 2 statutes under current law. The first is Wyoming Statute 2113-504. That's within Title 21, your education laws. And there's a second statute that school districts can establish a special reserve fund, and that's under Wyoming Statute 16-4105. So under the municipalities or Uniform Municipal Fiscal Procedures Act, under that act, municipalities, the definition of that includes school districts. By practice, I believe school districts only utilize one special reserve fund, or at least establish these reserve funds and limit their transfers up to 10% of their budget into those funds. The majority of these funds at least in their general fund, come from school foundation program, so K-12 block grant operation dollars. And so districts may transfer those to special reserve funds for a large purchase of technology. They may have a schedule of technology replacement, and those large capital purchases are included in their capital funds. It could be for purposes of replacing CTE equipment. Those are large capital expenditures. So Catherine will touch on those historical transfers into special reserve funds. But the piece that I wanted to touch on, in which this committee may want to clarify in law, is whether or not districts can have multiple special reserve funds established under Title 21 and Title 16. It's not clear. And that when we reviewed Senate File 156, that was one area that seemed to be a little bit murky. The next issue is a district may enhance a facility or seek approval from its voters through a bond measure. And there's a couple school districts that have done this recently. Albany County School District Number 1 and Carbon County School District Number 1 have enhanced their facility projects through a bond issue. And so they seek approval from their voters. When a school district does that, statute requires that a sinking fund of not less than 3% of the bond proceeds is established to maintain the future costs of that enhancement. And so in most cases, that 3% will take care of those future maintenance needs of those enhancements. The next piece, and we've touched on this a little bit today, is on the sale of real property. And this, again, may be an area where the committee may wish to clarify about the proceeds of when a school district disposes of either a school district building and facility or land. These statutes are quite confusing, just reading them. But generally, the statutes direct that the revenues from the disposition of the school buildings and facilities land are to be accounted for in future school district capital construction remedies. But it's not sure if those are state remedies or local remedies, if they can use those on their local enhancements, or if it's a combination of state, if they're contributing that proceed to the state portion of the cost of the project. So that may be something that the committee may wish to clarify or leave alone. But this discussion point came up during the Joint Appropriations Committee last session during the budget hearing with the State Construction Department. Finally, school districts have utilized other revenue sources to whether it's enhanced or maintain facilities, and that comes from recreation mill levies. School districts, or at least the school district assessed valuation, is utilized as the taxing authority for a recreation mill levy not to exceed 1 mil. Recreation boards can be a combination of a school district, a city, or county. And the 1 mil levy is assessed on the school district assessed valuation. And those proceeds are then receipted by the school district and primarily managed by school districts. The other source could be through private contributions, whether that's through booster clubs or a donation from the community. And then investment earnings, whether that's through their general fund. And then some school districts receive significant federal impact aid, primarily on the Wind River Indian Reservation. The state can't dictate how those funds are expended, but those districts can utilize federal impact aid dollars in a variety of manners. And then also, I've listed pre-1997 balances for newer members to the legislature prior to the Campbell, or the series of Campbell cases regarding school finance litigation, school districts had various balances in their general funds, and the state shielded those from any consideration as local revenues in the calculation of school finance entitlement or recapture payments. And so districts could potentially tap into those balances if they still exist. To finish up my comments, Mr. Chairman, the State Construction Department provided us, and I should have at the beginning indicated, this memo online was updated. I think Ashley sent it out to everybody, but we failed to include in the original meeting materials the attachment from the State Construction Department of the enhancements that had been identified by school districts to the State Construction Department. It's a very robust attachment. I think it's a little over 40 pages, but Table 1 summarizes the estimated cost of enhancements to school district buildings since fiscal year 2020 or 2004, just under $220 million, and leave it to the committee members to review their favorite districts. And then finally, Mr. Chairman, on page 4, just to give some context, since the state has taken responsibility of, primarily the responsibility of financing school capital construction, not including component projects that was just discussed, there's been approximately 176 either newly constructed facilities or renovated facilities, including ancillary buildings, totaling approximately $2.5 billion in construction and an additional $1.1 billion in major maintenance. Of the, over that time series, school districts have also provided about $146 million in local funds to either enhance those facilities or pay for part of that construction cost. So with that, I'll hand it over to Catherine to clean it up.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Before we do that, I just wanted to, ask for clarity on one point of confusion that I've heard, and I think it's certainly implied in the memo, but there was a discussion and a belief that you could use the 10% of major maintenance funding that's tagged for enhancements to build new enhancements. And it's my understanding that that is inaccurate, and based on what you presented, that is inaccurate. That 10% of major maintenance can be used for major maintenance of enhancements. Is that accurate?
Well, Mark.
Mr. Chairman, that's my understanding. I'll leave it to the department to correct our understanding of that, but no, I think it's the statute 2115-109F is pretty clear that it's to maintain those local enhancements.
Great, thanks. I just wanted to be perfectly clear on that.
We've never really debated enhancing the enhancements. Yeah. Anything else before we go to Catherine? If we're ready, let's go there.
Mr. Chairman, starting on page 4, figure 1, transfers by school districts from the general funds to the special reserve and capital projects funds. These are the total transfers to the capital projects and special reserve funds by year for fiscal years 2009 to 2024 in millions. And tables 3 and 4 provide the breakouts by school district over those same fiscal years. And before I really get into it, Figure 1 and tables 3 and 4 are really for illustrative purposes to show that for over 16 years, school district general funds, primarily allocated by the School Foundation Program, have been transferred to accounts that allow expenditure on enhancements. The data provided by the Wyoming Department of Education, which is where we source this information, does not provide the purposes as to what these funds were actually used for, just where the funds went to. And it's really important to clarify that, as noted earlier, there are many other purposes that funds within the special reserve and capital projects accounts are authorized to be expended on. And we're not inferring or suggesting or providing a report of how much of these transferred funds has been or have been spent on enhancements. In total, school districts transferred 46.6 million of school district general funds to special reserve funds and 339.3 million to capital projects funds. And tables 3 and 4, that's page 5 and 6, provide the breakouts of those transfers. You'll see that several districts have not made transfers of general funds. And again, we have specified which districts have not made transfers of the funds. Really, the reason why we included these tables and figure 1 at all was simply for contextual information for our last part of the memo, which is the review of 2025 SF 156, expenditure of state funds on K-12 public schools. And I'll let you review the charts. Please ask me any questions if you have any. Moving on to the last page, the review of SF 156. During the 2025 general session, the Senate discussed SF 156, but ultimately postponed the legislation indefinitely after second reading. When the bill was introduced, it amended several statutes, those being Wyoming Statute 2113-307, 2113-504, and 2115-109F, all relating to restricting funds being spent for purposes of capital projects and major maintenance. So specifically, 2113-307 restricts school districts from transferring or expending funds from the school foundation program or other amounts paid to school districts for operational expenses on major maintenance or a capital project. 2113-504 to restrict funds transferred to a special reserve fund on expenditures related to major maintenance or a capital project, and to restrict the expenditure of major maintenance funds on the maintenance of enhancements. As mentioned before, current law does not explicitly prohibit school districts from spending operational funds for purposes of maintenance or construction on school buildings and facility enhancements directly from a school district's general fund or by transferring operational funds to a special reserve fund or another fund. And we're not saying or specifying that districts are doing this or how much funds they're spending, just that the current law does not prohibit that from happening. And with that, Matt and I will stand for any questions. Sorry if I went through that a little quickly.
No, you did a great job, Catherine. Thank you, and appreciate the report from both of you. This is valuable information. Committee, it's interesting. You go back to page 2, and I think Mr. Wilmarth has a good suggestion that we may want to take a look at 2113-504 and 164105 as to whether there's crossover and whether or not we think it's a good idea for two separate funds. I'm not saying it is or isn't. And how we want to approach that, it might be that we'd want to have a little bit more robust discussion in August. There's other considerations on that page as well. And that's in the middle of the page, sale of real property. We may want to clean that one up too. So any questions, committee, on this front from our agency or for our staff? And then we'll go to our agency. Okay, you guys, thank you. We'll probably have a question here in a little bit. Okay, I want to give an opportunity for Director McComey and Administrator Carlson to weigh in on the use of funds on school building and facility projects.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And first off, I'll have Mr. Rexis discuss the use of funds for schools, buildings and facility projects, and specifically trying to look at how we use those major maintenance funds. So,
Thank you, Director. John, you taking the ball on this?
Yes, sir, Mr.
Okay,
Chairman.
thank you.
State Construction Department is responsible for calculating, distributing, authorizing, tracking, and reporting major maintenance funding that is distributed to and expended by the school districts. The Wyoming Department of Education is responsible for calculating, distributing, and tracking routine maintenance funding that is available to the districts through the block grant. I've included the reference to the statutory definitions for both of those, major maintenance and routine maintenance. Amounts distributed for major building and facility repair, which is major maintenance, are deposited by each district into a separate account, the balance of which may accumulate from year to year. As district requests are submitted, the school facility division project manager confirms that the requested work aligns with the requirements for major maintenance work and is specified in the district's facility plan, added to the facility plan if missing, or otherwise approved by the department. The State Construction Department does not have authority to direct the district on how their major maintenance funds will be expended. However, the State Construction Department does approve and authorize the expenditure of the associated funds based on the above or previously or just recently described procedure. And with that, I'll stand for any questions, Mr. Chairman.
So, Mr. Rex, would you say that you are aware of any and all funds that are spent on major maintenance out across the state?
Mr. Chairman, I would say that I have access to any and all funds. The approval usually comes at the project manager level. Being shorthanded, I've approved several of those requests myself in the recent 12 months, but all of those requests are tracked in our database, and they're reported at the end of every fiscal year by the school districts on what we call a 680 report that's tied directly to the planned work order that they submit that's approved by the project manager. I know that might need a little more explanation, so I'm happy to answer any questions about that.
No, I'm just trying to, get to the bottom of whether or not these special funds could be spent on an enhancement out there. I'm not saying they ever would be, but could they, without you being aware that the major maintenance money is being spent on a capital construction project to enhance an enhancement?
Mr. Chairman.
Would you know about it?
Yes, I think we would. It gets rather complicated, though, because we've got enhancement-like components that predate the department. They're not officially designated as enhancements because they were in place long before the department was created. But we do treat those as enhancements in regards to major maintenance expenditures. They're only eligible for 10% major maintenance. There are exceptions that have been made on certain projects due to different conditions. And I think maybe a great example of that is there's probably 3 or 4 artificial turf fields around the state where it was almost impossible to grow natural turf based on either soil conditions or the availability of irrigation, those types of things, where the commission has granted an exception to the district to not designate those as enhancements. So that could confuse it a little bit, but typically everything post-conception of the School Facilities Commission that is considered to be an enhancement is designated as such within our database. So that's one of the areas that the project managers routinely check as these planned work orders come into the department to make sure that they aren't listed as an enhancement In addition to that, the project managers will they'll use their discretion to determine if it's an enhancement type asset, I guess, for lack of a better term, on those pre-existing buildings and components.
Okay, thank you, John. Appreciate that. Yeah, Madam Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a question, just in concern. We really want to make sure major maintenance is a priority. We want to make sure that's done. Obviously, that's going to prolong the life of buildings and save money for the state and the taxpayers. So my question is, do you see that major maintenance is being completed? I know you guys do your job and you get the money to the districts. Are you seeing it being completed? Or is there a follow-through to make sure that those things are being done?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, there is a follow-through, especially on the reconciliation with the 680. I would say some planned work orders, and we're trying to clean this up, but some planned work orders are submitted preemptively by the districts, and sometimes they fall out of order and priority, and it takes several years to do that. In the past, I think some of those planned work orders have remained open, and there may be one or more repairs associated with that, so the department's taken steps to request that districts close those planned work orders that have been out there for quite some time, even if the work hasn't been completed, in order to renew that. And it's specifically important now in consideration of the assessment data that we have, because we need to go in and reduce the deficiencies as those remedies are realized. And on major maintenance type work, it would prove very difficult to try to do that at the annual reconciliation, because we get somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000 major maintenance requests a year. And so what we do is we try to go in, and as those requests are submitted, even though the work might not be done right away, because the requests are in and there's an intent there for the districts to resolve that issue, we're reducing that deficiency, not necessarily by the amount that the district spends, but by the amount of the deficiency that was identified in the assessment. And I know that may be a little confusing, but sometimes your major maintenance costs might surpass what your original estimated budget is, just because of adjacencies that are affected on other components and other work where there's an economy to resolve those issues at the same time that you're resolving the others. So we just go in and we determine on a case-by-case basis how to reset that clock and reestablish that life cycle for those components, and how much of that deficiency to eliminate based on the type of work that's being done, whether it's a full replacement or just a minor repair to that particular system.
Okay. You know, I think maybe on everyone's mind up here would simply be, if we've got open work orders from a while back, I wonder how many of those we've got, and how come the work wasn't done that those work orders were directed at. So that's a little concerning to hear that we've got work out there that was approved and just never got done. I share the concern that the vice chairman has, which is, you know, we've worked so hard to try to get funding up on the major maintenance front because we really care about it and we know how much good it'll do. Would we even, is that something we can track, something that we would know?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. We've got a spreadsheet and we're tracking that. In fact, we cleared up almost all of those work orders that were older than 3 years through this recent facility planning process. We sent out data and lists of projects to the districts to ask them, you know, what's the status with this particular project? And because it's been sitting out there so long, even if you haven't done the work, please close out that planned work order and resubmit a new one, because if it's a 6 or 7 year old planned work order, chances are the cost estimate and the budget for that planned work order are dated and insufficient at this point.
Well, that's great news. I mean, I appreciate that very much, John. Thank you for that answer.
And Mr. Chairman, I think Senator Rothfuss may have had a
Senator
question.
Rothfuss.
Hey, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of follow up one more time on the Senate File 156 from last session, which prompted some of this discussion. As that bill was coming through, I was trying to understand or identify where there might be an opportunity to misapply major maintenance funds towards new enhancements or towards new buildings, and honestly couldn't identify any. And so I just want to ask directly, am I missing something? Is there some way that major maintenance funds in any capacity could be redirected to a new building project? I guess a new security vestibule you could do, because I know we have still the allowance for 10% on that. But I don't see any way to create a new enhancement. I don't see a way to create a new building. But I wanted to ask you that same question. Is there something I'm missing where we can be misusing these major maintenance funds to build new projects?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, I'm not aware of any new construction or project in my 14 years with the department that's been completed using major maintenance funds.
So, Senator, my mind's been working overtime late in the day to try to get arms around these special funds too. And I'm usually fairly reluctant to take away any sort of local control. But I do understand where there could be some misunderstanding with the ability to set up two different kinds of special funds out there. And it's a battle sometimes with our colleagues to try to take information like that from the select committee and help people understand, why those exist. Why do we have sometimes substantial amounts of money sitting over on the side? And so I think that's why you have a committee up here tonight just going, what are we going to do? I agree with Mr. Wilmarth. We probably need to look at that and make sure we understand why we have two special funds that districts can set aside, and then get some assurance from our agency folks that those funds are being used properly. And we're getting that tonight, but does that make sense, Mr. Rexis? I just, that's why we're trying to even come up with the right kind of questions on these funds that we have allowed by statute.
It does, Mr. Chairman, and I would say part of our facility planning process every year as well is that we track all major maintenance expenditures by building. So we have a comprehensive list of the total amount of expenditures and the type of expenditures by Uniform Act code, and I'll explain what that is here shortly, during the course of the year on every building that's out there. So if we've got a building that either is an entire enhancement, we've got a full accounting of the funds that were expended on that building. And if we've got a building that maybe has a component or a portion of the building that's enhanced, we can also track that as well, because we do know where those funds are expended. So while we try to be proactive and prevent that from happening on the front end, if it ever were to happen and we were able to verify that and determine that, there is a process and a way for us to withhold those funds from the next year's funding for major maintenance in order to pay that account back, and the district then has to account for that as well.
Mr. Rexis, that makes sense. And there's a piece of me that says, well, there might come a circumstance. We've got the agency backing us up here providing the permission, to utilize these funds, would there ever be a situation where, of course, you could use those special funds because we've got an emergency situation and we've got to rebuild something that might have even existed in the 1990s before we even took this over? So my fear is always, we knee-jerk something and we say, well, we're not going to allow those kind of funds anymore. And it might end up impacting somebody down the road when we might really need that flexibility. So, that's the piece of me that wants to be a little bit careful. Director?
Mr. Chairman, so, we talk about those enhancements that were identified prior to the Campbell cases in this department and becoming about. So I think a good example of that is the New Rock Springs High School that's being funded right now. They have a swimming pool in that old school, but it's considered an enhancement. So when they're building the new one, we didn't budget money for a new swimming pool. That's something that the district is going to have to go out and bond for, use other funds, a number of these other rec mill things that were identified by your LSO staff to try and figure out how they're going to fund in the future a replacement swimming pool at that high school. And I know, having visited with their facility manager, Dan Celeroli, just recently on that discussion's going on, and it's very vigorous in the community right now, and special board on how are you going to fund, a multi-million-dollar new swimming pool that's outside of the funding that was provided by the legislature. Much like Mr. Rexis, we've looked at that funding on enhancements with the monies that we're responsible to track over the years, and we look at that pretty hard. We get requests once in a while because there's some gray areas in this, and when I say gray areas is, let's go back to the description that Mr. Wilmarth talked about with, say, the height of a gym. So there was a number of years when we were building gymnasiums and they didn't meet the criteria in like the K-6 buildings or even the junior high buildings that met the standards for what was needed to have a regulation, say basketball or volleyball in that building. And so the districts in quite a few cases said, we'll pay for the extra 2 foot to raise that up above what our adequacy standards were. So now when you go in and work on a building, which 2 foot are we working on in that gymnasium? How much of that do we apply to it when we're fixing the roof on the gymnasium, but you only raised it at the square area? But what if you had to do some work on the wall of the building? How much of that? And that's really a call where John and his staff sit down and work out with the district. Okay, so much of this is going to be enhancement applied funding, and so much of this is regular major maintenance funding based on those unique situations.
Director, the top 2 rows of bleachers that belong to enhancement, the rest of them.
Yeah, so it's pretty complicated. I would say for us, probably the bigger thing that we work with the districts on all the time is the difference between what is routine maintenance and what is major maintenance. And there's been every facility managers meeting, we kind of have that discussion. And when we rework the adequacy standards and the design standards, we talk about those issues, because it doesn't matter where you set the bar in the definition of routine maintenance. There's always going to be a gray area right where you set those bars. And if we change the bar, I can guarantee you there's going to be that gray area where we change that bar at. So that's more of a robust day-to-day discussion that our project managers and John have with the district, is what's truly major maintenance and what is routine maintenance through the block grant. And John talked about the definitions here, but I think in the major maintenance, something that's very important in that definition is the irregular interval of funding that. It's not something like you change your oil on your car every 6 months or so many miles. It's something irregular on the major maintenance. And then the definition on a routine maintenance, really probably in it, and this is, so we have this definition in statute, but from a working standpoint and from industry, and this is nationwide, it's really what can be accomplished in, say, intervals of 12 months. Within that first 12 months, maybe up to 18 months, depending on what it is. And anything beyond 18 months that's coming up for replacement or work falls under that category of major maintenance. So you can see how there's a little bit of a discrepancy. And again, that's a day-to-day work with the districts. I don't see abuse of that. It's just that because not all this stuff comes up all the time, they're having that discussion with us. And I think that's fruitful that they're out there asking those questions.
Thank you, Director.
Mr. Chairman, I did say I was going to get back and explain Uniform Act codes. That's essentially just a coding process for all the different components and systems within a school. And with this new assessment, we've expanded those. Previously, I think we had somewhere in the vicinity of 70 Uniform Act codes for a building. And now we're up to 191. So there's a much higher degree of specificity on the systems and components that we're working on, and that allows us to capture our data more accurately and report it to you more accurately as well.
Thank you. Any further questions, committee? Thank you for spending a few minutes on the use of funds. Director, that was really helpful, and appreciate Ms. Carlson and Mr. Rexus. Thank you. Anything further that you have?
Yes, there is, Mr. Chairman, and that's really the conditions that impact the spending on major maintenance. And I'm going to do this at a very high level. I know we're getting late in the day, but this is a discussion that doesn't deal with millions of dollars. This is a discussion over the life cycle of a building that deals for the state and the impacts of the state of billions of dollars, billions, not millions of dollars. And so when we look at this, I'm going to go back in history a little bit, and we talked about going from 2% to 2.5%. And over time, one of the things that was allowed for this year only in the legislation that passed last year in the budget was to talk about excess square footage. That square footage that is in a district that isn't accounted for when you go through your average daily, your ADM calculations to see how much we pay for major maintenance and how much we don't. It's very complicated as to how you apply this at different levels on non-educational buildings, for example, if it's within a certain percentage and a different percentage and things like that, but it's all in a formula-driven stuff for us in a computer. We can hit the easy button and figure this out pretty quick, but for the layman to look at this is pretty complicated. But it started out in history that we were funding the excess square footage. You would take what that was and we would apply that major maintenance calculation up to 200%. And if you look on page 2 of 14, you'll see how that kind of morphed over time. So from 2004 to 2005, it was 200%. Then it went down to 135% in 2004 and 5 and 6. And then it dropped down to 125%. And then down to where after this year, we're back at 115% of that excess square footage. Now, part of the thought process behind that was there is a lot of excess square footage out in the districts, and we don't take that into the major maintenance calculation, so the districts don't get paid to take care of their buildings on that excess square footage. On the state side, we don't do that. We don't apply an ADM calculation that says how many kids are in a school. So we pay for major maintenance on the square foot of the entire building, because if you're shorting it based on how many students are in the building, you still have the whole building. You got to take care of the whole building. If we have one superintendent, one district right now that we're visiting with, that they've got I think it's a 7, 8, K-12 or not 12 that is only 35% full. So they're only getting 35% of the major maintenance calculation for that building. So 65% of it isn't driving any dollars, but they got to take care of the whole building. And so we're having the discussion, and I hate to kind of have this, but we're having the discussion, is it maybe better in the state's interest and the district's interest to tear part of that building down and right-size it? And then I go back to this discussion we had on growth and all of that, and then what, are we going to come back and build more on it later? And so again, when you go through and the studies that were done, and Mr. Chairman, there's a number of you on the committee that went through that era where we hired a consultant to come out and say, what should we fund what's the right amount of major maintenance funding to get the life expectancy out of our buildings? And we optimized that at 75 years. So there was a few things that went into that, the 2.5, which the committee sponsored a bill last year, got passed at 2.5. That's one of the factors. Another factor is this square footage, these calculations on this percentage. And so, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to revisit that later in your future meetings of should we not be looking at that 135% again as came out of this committee? Because it is a $1 billion decision for the state if we don't take care of our buildings. They deteriorate faster. At the 2% and what the consultant reviewed back in 2015, 16 as how we were funding our buildings, our life expectancy of our buildings were only 35 to 50 years. So we have some buildings that, guess what? What are we doing in Campbell right now at their high school, at Rock Springs at their high school? Those two schools are 52, 53 years old. So at the funding level, we were funding those. That's their life expectancy. And there was a lot of discussion and debate. Well, did the district take care of those buildings properly? Were they taking care of it? Were they maintaining those buildings? With the dollars we were giving them, they met that life expectancy that was drawn out from that consultant. But we believe we can get longer life out of our buildings out to that 75 years. And Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to run through every page, but if you go back to some of these pages a little later in here, you can see the charts that were laid out and the life expectancies. And if you do the right amount of major maintenance dollar funding, how that will drive your cost expectancies. The short and the long of it, at the end of the day through that study that was done starting back in 16 through, I think it was 18 or 19, because we did a couple of them, was that if we fund our major maintenance at the right value, and this is on page 8 of 14 if you come down to the bottom, the life expectancy, so driving that up to 75 years and not building as many major or capital construction projects rather than doing just the major maintenance. If you factor out that increased cost in major maintenance, that saved the state $3.3 billion. $3.3 billion. Go back to the report that LSO talked about earlier today on how much we've spent on capital construction. It's around $3 billion total since the department was started. This is equivalent savings just by doing the major maintenance at the right amount. So again, I think it's something that we need to have a good discussion on and move forward. I'm pleased. I'm hearing really good comments from the districts that we're going to see this increase in major maintenance funding, and it will go a long ways in providing the longevity of our buildings. I think that's really a step in the right direction, but we need to make sure we stay after this, so.
Director, I think I saw one of the senators write down that we should reconsider a bill in our second meeting on that square footage of 135%. We did that, you might recall, committee, just for 1 year. And I think it would be appropriate for somebody to make that motion that we at least take a look at that again. And consider whether or not we want to put that in permanently or ongoing. But points well made, Director. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Just one final thing, Mr. Chairman. And so when there was the debate in the Senate this past year, and it was mentioned earlier on, we need to report out to this committee and the Joint Appropriations Committee, I believe it's by October, on the department, I believe, is what it's looked. There's kind of three parts to this, but the department maybe taking over and looking at the routine or the major maintenance projects and managing those projects for all the buildings that were built since, I believe, 2020 up through 26 or 7. Some of them haven't been built yet, but through those projects. I'd really like some clarification and maybe some discussion with the committee more to help us understand exactly what the legislature was looking for in that realm. What do you want us to propose, or what information do you want us to give you? I know one of the things that we were looking at from manpower wise, as Mr. Rex has talked about, there's 4,000 to 5,000 major maintenance projects a year. And if you hand off 10 or whatever, 15 of those hand off 100 of them to one project manager, which you couldn't handle 100 of them, one person. But really what you're asking for is we're going to have another 40, 50 people in staff, I think, to do that. And then I believe, just like in local government, the closer you are to the people, the better response you have to it. And right now, the districts are handling those projects. They've got their janitorial staff embedded, they have their facility managers embedded in each one of those districts. They're right in that school where we're sitting down in Cheyenne. How do we really keep the pulse of what's going on in those buildings, manage those projects, let the things to contract, as I would read it, as we're being asked to do, and do that. I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm just saying that I'd like to have a better understanding of what you want us to spend time working on to give you the information, and what's the outcome of what you were looking for when that was noted.
So given your walk of life years ago, Director, how many satellite stations are there for YDOT scattered out across the state?
If you include the maintenance, I think we've got about 50-some stations, resident engineers. And this is a while back, it could have changed, but I think we had like 28 resident engineers office. Now, some of them, we had like 2 offices in Rock Springs and some of the bigger district offices, but you're talking a lot of locations. Now, could we set something up like YDOT, and you set up 5 districts around the state, you have a district staff, you have your local people that are embedded? Sure, it could be done. Does the school facility or the school district facility folks all come over and become employees of the state, and they work in that and we manage it? It could be done. But it's going to be an awful heavy lift and a lot of transition and to do that. And again, my feelings is that keep it as local as you can. And so at a YDOT stance, you have your resident engineer, he's talking to the mayors, he's talking to the counties, he's talking to the foreman. He reports up to a district construction engineer that's in one of those 5 districts, and you have that, and then the district engineer, they report to the headquarters folks. So we could certainly set something up like that, but again,
Good enough.
this isn't a
I think you
one-year
got my
study.
point.
Yeah.
That's where I wanted to go with that. And so, committee, just, first of all, Director, I'll make an attempt to answer your question because it's a legitimate one. And you're right, that did come up. I can't remember if it was a full-blown discussion on the floor of the Senate. I think it was more in the side hallways than it was out on the floor. But, and my friends in the Senate can correct me if I'm right, but I can't imagine that whoever was talking about that had any idea what sort of magnitude we'd be looking at if we wanted to take over all the maintenance of schools out across Wyoming. Honestly, I don't see how we could do it, and I don't see how we could afford it. But that's me, and maybe my colleagues would like to weigh in on it. I don't know. Senator, down at the end, I'm looking down that direction. I don't know. I don't mind when people bring up ideas. I think that's terrific. I just think that that policy consideration would be a heck of a lift.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, as I recall, it kind of came up in concert with both the new high schools to provide oversight on how that major maintenance was accomplished to make sure it was getting done. I believe that was the intent of it. Does that help?
Yeah, I think that's fine and good, and And I think that we will always be concerned that we're taking care of the buildings when we're putting that kind of money in them. Senator Rothfuss?
You know, that does remind me of a concept, though, that we talked about at one point, the idea of an owner's rep on a project, and we kind of have that because we've got project managers for all the projects, but staff is pretty small at this point. I think of the capital restoration, when the best decision we made was hiring an owner's rep. That didn't cost us money, that saved us money. Tens of millions of dollars, I would say, is what that saved us for a better project outcome to hire that independent contractor. So when we look at the high schools in particular, right, we've got we'll hit 150 million each on those projects easily. What are we doing for owner's rep? Is that going to be something which would be remote and we would be doing that from facilities, or are we relying on the district? Because I would have liked, in hindsight, you know, our high school is incredible. It really is. But looking at the owner's rep experience with the capital restoration and looking at some of the problems we ended up having with our high school because we didn't have a true owner's rep expert, right? We had our district personnel engaging, but nobody was an expert at really the contracting side of things. I think we probably would have saved money and had better quality on the high school if we'd have had an owner's rep showing up every single day, walking that site and saying, no, you're not going to do it this way. No, it needs to be this way. No, that's not what we have in the contract. Are we doing that for our two new high schools? What's our process for that?
I'm going to have Mr. Rexis weigh in as to what we're doing, and we do have dollars available in the project, but I'd like to go back to the concept of what we did in this building right here. And what we've recently done through legislation on the state side. So we've hired owner's reps, and sometimes you get good owner's reps and sometimes you don't get good owner's reps. And when we hire outside owner's reps, it's hard to finally go through and say, we don't believe this is doing it, bring another owner's rep in when you're talking to the owner of the company for the owner's rep. We want somebody that knows what's going on. We're not satisfied, but you're through that process. And it's a long, drawn-out process to do that. So what we did on this is we established within the project funds, we asked the legislature for some money to do an owner's rep as part of the project, just like we would if we went out and consulted it. But they gave us an AWAC position. We now have 4 AWAC positions in the state side for that. They're unfunded AWAC positions. And we tie the funding to them to the project. So when we do that, now we're hiring our own owner's rep. Doesn't work. We're not going out and hiring an owner's rep from the private sector. We're hiring it just like it's a state employee, but it's somebody that's skilled in many years of service. And what we're hiring is guys that have been doing this for 30, 35, 40 years. Some cases they've kind of starting to retire out in their career, and they've been around the block and seen this. This thing came in, great building. We're not hearing issues, came in under budget. And so that could be something we could apply to the school side, particularly on these larger projects. The other thing that we went through, and we ran analysis on this, we can hire that employee as a state employee on our side for a third of what it costs to go out on the consultant side and hire that same employee. And we feel we have better accountability. If they're not handling it right, that's a day-to-day conversation with us and them, not as it's kind of progressing down the road. So that could be something that we could apply to these larger projects.
So go ahead, Senator.
Well, and I really think it would save us money and time to do that and have somebody who is resident in Campbell County and Gillette, somebody who is resident in Rock Springs, and maybe you utilize one of those 2 AWACs. If you have 4 of them open and they're not filled right now, basically working with those communities to allocate a position for that, just like we did with this building, and again, just like we did with the Capitol. We will end up with so much of a better outcome as a result of doing that. I think it would be tremendous. So, maybe give that some thought. We can talk about it at the next meeting.
Okay.
I think,
Thank you.
I appreciate it, Senator. That's a little bit of a different issue than we were talking about major maintenance, but a very, very important one. And I agree wholeheartedly, having served as the chairman of the task force on this building. This is a remarkable achievement, in my opinion. Everything went so well on this building. And it's 5 years into a 13-year plan to have itself paid for. This will pay for itself in 13 years. So I'd like to replicate that. But as far as major maintenance, we'll continue this conversation, Director. I think I appreciate you bringing that up, and I appreciate the senator reminding me, what context as we put these big expensive buildings on the ground. It's important that we take care of them. Doing that out of Cheyenne, that would be a lift. Mr. Rex.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Mr. Chairman. I just thought it would be important to let the committee know that when we're reviewing these planned work orders, and now with the current assessment data that we have, one of the things my project managers are tasked to looking at is any premature failures to any of the components or systems. Now, I understand that's a little bit forensic, and at that point, it's a little bit too late. But that does give us an opportunity to work with the districts and help them understand some of the things that are important in order to bring longevity to their systems and components. And I certainly don't mean to insinuate that there are facility managers out there that need that kind of help, but there are some of them that do. We see a really high turnover in facility managers and district administrative staff as well. And I think that may be one of the reasons why we had some of them older planned work orders out there. As new administrations and new facility managers come in, perspectives are different, priorities change, that sort of thing. Right now, there isn't anything punitive for a district that maybe doesn't perform all their routine maintenance and that has premature failure on some of its systems or components. But I really don't see that as a big issue from what I've seen, and my understanding is a lot of the systems and components that we have around the state are outlasting their expected life cycle. Some of them are failing prematurely, but we all hear stories about the guy who bought a brand new car and it broke down on the way home. So sometimes it's not always about how they're performing their routine maintenance. Sometimes things just fail because they're defective right out of the gate. But those are the types of things we're taking a look at, and we're taking a look at what corrective measures can we make to ensure that that isn't going to happen, not just in that same district, but all across the state.
Thank you, Mr. Rexis. We're getting late in the day, and that's our final topic, and I appreciate the agency coming forward. Good stuff. Thank you, guys. Committee, I want to go to public comment on this topic, the use of funds. And I will accept public comment on any other topic that you'd like to bring forward. So take it away, Dan. It's good to see you.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee.
Put that real close for me, would you please, Dan?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. A couple thoughts. We're talking about 10% enhancements. To me, enhancements, the best use of it is educating the staff that we have in facility departments.
Mr. Chairman.
Changes.
Sorry to interrupt. Can we get a name?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, thank you very much,
Dan
Representative.
Celeroli, Sweetwater County School District number 1. Okay, sorry.
Okay. Yeah,
But,
speak
you know,
right into the microphone, speak up late in the day. Attaboy. Good job.
Anything else? Buildings change, building systems change so frequently. What happens is we have to bring people in. You talk about using major maintenance up, when the average service call is $85 to $105 an hour per person, and everybody today travels 2 people per truck. I did service work for many years, for all over the United States, and I always traveled by myself. So things are changing. Technology is changing. Facility guys don't change. You have facility guys that's one of the longest, they get in the facilities and they don't leave. It's a good job, they're secure, they have benefits, so they stay there 25, 30 years. But technology is changing. So how do you bring these guys along unless you can bring somebody in? And so there's an expense to that. On controls, control systems, we put control systems in brand new schools 13 years ago. Well, the refrigeration systems, the chillers, they're 410. I mean, that's a refrigerant that is no longer used. I mean, it's outlawed. So now guys have to have the education to know how to change it, because if we have to subcontract that out, you're talking tens of thousands of dollars. If a compressor goes bad on a chiller that's 13 years old, 10 years old, you're talking $20,000 to change out a system. If you contract it out, you're talking probably half that. I try to get the most bang for my buck. I've been a contractor for many years. I worked in hospital, in healthcare systems, and so I always try to get as much as I can for the dollar. And I found you cannot beat doing things in-house, but you have to have the staff that knows what the hell to do. If you have a staff that is not educated in the systems that you have, then you might as well go back to the old custodial days where a guy walked around with a hammer and a rag in his hand. I mean, that's how the systems are just improving rapidly. So I would really like the committee, and I know this may be a JAC, and I know we have 2 members of JAC on it, to think about using 10% funds to allow us to educate some of our staff members. Whether it's bringing people in, I mean, I deal with a lot of the facility managers throughout the state. We've got like 15 people that I communicate all the time. Even if we did regionals, it still costs somebody money to bring people in. But I see as the technology is advancing and our knowledge of how to work on it is not. And it just costs money to bring things in. The other 2 things that I'd like to have this committee maybe think about is, it's been a long time since we looked at bid limits. $50,000, I remember a time, and I'm sure Senator Landon, Senator Rothfuss remember a time when contracts, you had to go out to bid over $25,000. I remember a time when you had to go out for a bond at $7,500. Well, they raised the bonding limit from $7,500 to $150,000, and then they left the contractors from $25,000 to $50,000. Same thing with architects. Professional services. Professional services only applies to architects, engineers, and surveyors, and it's $25,000 limit. Let's think about bringing everything up to $150,000. When you're working with major maintenance money, a lot of it is short scheduled projects. By the time we put together specifications to go out to bid, by the time we follow the bid process, sometimes you're talking 2 months. If we had that $150,000, the same as the bonding limit, heck, I can move through a lot more major maintenance projects with a lot less hassle, a lot less time. Plus, now that the booms, I mean, you look at Rock Springs. I was a facility director. I've been a facility director so long, I remember when the director's name was Bubba. Okay, that's a long time. And I was in 2 districts, Uinta and now currently Rock Springs. What's happened is everybody's leaving. I mean, the companies, everything's kind of settled down. Most of the districts throughout the state only have a few companies that can offer the services that you need, the resources. So now I have to go out to bid and maybe get somebody from Casper, maybe get somebody from Salt Lake City to come to Rock Springs to do a job. When they go home, any problems that come up, it's a hassle to try to get them to come back. Anybody who had to deal with elevator people, I mean, it becomes a grander scale. So I would, those are the 3 things that I'd really like for this committee to consider. Thank you.
Got them written down, Dan. Thank you. Committee, any questions for our guy from Sweetwater? Senator Rothfuss.
On the bid process, are you, through your acquisition process, are you capable of establishing a bidded relationship with a provider so that rather than having to wait, I need to replace this boiler, I bid out ahead of time, I'm going to find somebody to do boiler maintenance, and then that ends up being a company in place for quite a while. In other words, not having to wait for something to be responsive to, but proactively put out your request.
Boiler, Chair, Senator, boilers might not be the best example, because with boilers you have, if you have PK boilers, you're going to replace it with a PK boiler. That limits you to a region. So the region, you can't go outside your region. But on other things, HVAC systems, Okay, HVAC systems may vary from one system to, from one facility to the other. So could you, I don't know how the logistics of getting something like that shelf ready so that if you had to go out to bid, you could. With a 7% increase every year on products, maybe you could, but I don't know that that would expedite and help me out on the district level.
Thank you, Senator, and thanks, Dan, appreciate it. Obviously, that third item is something that we'd be talking to contractors and some other constituents to kind of see about that, but point's well taken. Yeah.
And Senator Landon, I work closely with Wyoming Contractor Coalition, and I've been talking with contractors. I was a contractor prior to getting in the schools. And I have not met one contractor who is okay with leaving it at $50,000. So something to keep in mind.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, which one wants to be next? Hey, take it away. We'll go right
not
to
sure the
left,
age thing is
straight
correct.
down the row.
Mr. Chair, Dave Bartlett, Campbell County School District. Thank you for letting me talk. I actually had planned not to talk, but after this last portion, I just want to point some things out, and then I want to support many of the things that the department talked about. First of all, so I've been doing the facility work for about 20 years over 2 districts. 15 capital projects, numerous renovations. I'll go back to planned work orders. That question came up. I will tell you, early on in my career, we were asked by staff that supersedes anybody behind me to put planned work orders in for any contemplated work you may have. Now, since then, the process has changed, the emphasis has changed, and I think Mr. Rexis is right. Staff have done a great job of going and cleaning it up. But again, you have a lot of those work orders that are out there that lingered for a long time simply because that's what we were asked to do. So the process has changed. In terms of enhancements, I would tell you, I think when I look at the Campbell cases and just the history of time, enhancements are actually contemplated as being part of the process. And I would, pools came up. That's a great example. Swimming is a part of our K-6 curriculum. It's part of numerous high schools' activity programs, and yet it's not funded in the model. And again, so what we have to do is we have to plan for those rather large expenses. And I think if you will look at, in your package, you've got a list of enhancement inventories. If you look at many of the smaller districts that have that $3, $4, $5 million enhancement dollar figure there, they're going to be pools. What I would tell you is you also have to contemplate on enhancements culminating events. State swimming, that is an event that's going to need to house 600-700 swimmers, 1,500 to 3,000 people. And currently you have 3 pools in the state that can take care of that. Albany just built a beautiful facility. They can handle it. Laramie One with East High, and then the Aquatic Center in Gillette that is currently being replaced because it's end of life. But without enhancements, without the ability to do this, how do we have those culminating events which are part of our high schools? But when you look at enhancements, I would tell you, over my career, Dell talked about ceiling height. Junior high, we would enhance those to make sure that our high schools could spill over into their synthetic turf. I believe somewhere between 42 of the 48 districts have those fields. And what I would tell you is it may not be cheaper to maintain, but what it does do is it allows you to have far, far more events on that surface. If it's a high school varsity field, you may only be on that 10 or 12 times a year if it's grass, or you'll kill it. Once you move to turf, you're up to 125, 130 events. So the access our students have to that increases greatly. We've talked about STEM labs, career tech ed spaces, mechanical mezzanines for a long time were enhancements. When you've got schools, rural schools, it's important to encase those systems. Again, early on, I know I had, in my time in Laramie One, I had a couple schools where mezzanines were called out as enhancements. They were important enough to us. We felt like it lengthened the life cycle of equipment that we did that. A common practice in Campbell County in elementaries, they expand the student common area, and they do that so that we can feed students in that space so that the gyms are available for class. Otherwise, you end up shutting that part of the building down. In a large school, it could be for an hour and a half, 2 hours a day. Parking lots. Parking lots is a big one. I would tell you that our current standard for junior high and elementaries is 1 space for every 4.5 students. If you have a Title I elementary school, the number of additional staff you have, I've built facilities where the standard would only have left me 20 extra spaces for visitors, parent parking for special events. At a high school, it's 2.5 students will drive 1 parking spot. So a building of 1,200 students, I would get 480 parking spaces. So if you think about our high school students these days, 1,200 students, you probably start the year with about 500 juniors and seniors driving, but by the time you get to the spring and our sophomores are driving, you're out of parking. And that doesn't include staff. So many of your enhancements really are not just stadium lights, seating, but it's all of these other components to go into the building that where the standards are, schools understand that depending upon the community, we have to address those. And so what I would tell you is over time, and currently, as I say, Campbell County, we are in the process of replacing the pool. That is something that the district, far before I was there, contemplated it. They knew it was in the end of life, and they made arrangements to pull that money together, either between the depreciation fund or through the rec mill. And to the point of square footage and using major maintenance on enhancements, I would tell you, I believe that our major maintenance dollars are the most heavily scrutinized dollars that I have in my entire budget. The department staff does a great job. We call our project manager, we put a planned work order in, and we talk about it. Is it the only time I can do something beyond what I already have there is if I'm upgrading an existing system. I cannot add square footage, and they're very tight on that. So I'm not sure the concept of how it came to be that we're using major maintenance dollars on enhancements, but really what we're doing is we're maintaining what we have. So with that, Mr. Chair, I think I'll stop. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Senator,
go
just a quick
ahead.
follow-up. You said you're using a district to rebuild the pool?
Senator, yes.
Anything else? Okay. Let's move on down the line here.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman.
Not least. Yeah, here we go.
My name's Kirk Schmidt. I live in Lander. I'm retired now.
You retired?
Previous to that, I worked in K-12 education. I was a business manager for 38 years. So I kind of I did come in on the start of all this, and this discussion is, I don't know if it's a nightmare or just, it's interesting to think of how everything's changed and probably to the better, Mr. Chairman. There has been a lot of change. I mean, I can remember when it first started, there was a very adversarial relationship between the school facility department and school districts. That does not exist anymore. That's a team effort. I mean, it really is. Everybody just wants to take the best care of the facilities they can. One of the questions that came up earlier talking about, can you build new construction out of major maintenance without school facility known? You couldn't. There's too many times there is somebody in that district from the state that would go, where'd that come from? I mean, it's physically impossible. And I don't know a school district that would intentionally try to defraud that system, because that just gives everybody a black eye.
I'm going to interrupt real quickly. Ashley, did we get an official name just now for the record? Did you state your name for the record for us?
I did, Kirk Schmidt.
Yes, he did. He led with that.
All right, good deal. I just wanted to make sure. It's getting late.
Okay, and now let me go back to some of the things that I wanted to start with. Mr. Chairman, and you and I have been through this a lot of years, and I wish I had $1 for every time cash reserve and swimming pools came up, because I probably wouldn't be sitting here. Let's talk about a school district budgeting process. A school district operates as a government entity, and their goal every year is to spend less than they collect. That's your goal as a government entity, is you want to have a surplus at the end of the year. You could have a deficit, but not very often, because all of a sudden you got no money and you got to deal with that. So if you remember, Mr. Chairman, and so that they've been around, there's been a lot of discussions over why school districts have cash reserves. There was the 15%, it's been increased. I mean, that's gone on and on and on. And that's kind of where Senate File 156, I mean, people are looking at cash reserves. Well, okay, when I was in Fremont One, if we were fiscally watching our dollars, and we only spent 97% of our budget. Okay, if our budget was $30 million, we'd have $900,000 at the end of 1 year. Okay, well, you take Natrona County School District, that's $250 million, take 3% of that, okay, that's over $7 million. Okay, so what are you gonna do with it? Okay, you can't spend it on ongoing expenditures. That gets you in trouble in a heartbeat. Use it for one-time money, accumulate it to use it for capital construction. Those kinds of things are what are fiscally responsible to the taxpayers to do. You guard that money. But to take that away from school districts and criticize them, we all understand that the funding model was never intended for capital construction. There isn't anybody that's going to disagree with that. But when you get the end of the year with a surplus, what's your plan? School districts have been planning that for a long, long time. Everybody in Wyoming is very grateful that we've had the funds over the last 25 years when this process started to build the buildings we have. And now we're in a phase where we're trying to take care of them, and the whole conversation about major maintenance is where that's headed. There was a time, and I haven't heard it today, but I'm surprised I haven't, there was a criticism in the past of legislators that were saying, well, what do you spend a major maintenance money on a new building for? Well, if you talk to anybody that has to take care of a brand new building, you spend more time, effort, money in the first 3 years than you do the next 10. Because you got to have a shakedown cruise. I mean, there are just things that come up that you absolutely can't anticipate. There are systems that fail. I mean, okay, how many times have you heard people talk about a brand new car that they had to let sit for 3 months? I mean, buildings are the same way. So you have to spend that money on the front end, and that's what's important to that. One of the other things that came up, and in your material, it talks about excess square footage. You certainly don't want to build a building that's capacity the day you walk into it. So there is excess capacity built into schools now. Well, how come we can spend major maintenance money on excess capacity, but there are buildings that have enhanced capacity that is actually less than excess capacity? So how do you determine that? All of a sudden, you have $6,000 worth of enhanced square footage on an 80,000 square foot building. You gotta re-roof it. You gotta come up with the money to do that? And what funds can you do that with? School districts don't have any extra funds to do that with. I mean, there's no revenue in there. I mean, you talk about pre-97 money, that's going away just by virtue of time. But the one thing that kind of got brought up, Mr. Chairman, when you talked about having the state take care of school facilities, the local control issue is a huge issue these days in the legislature. I mean, the school board in the majority of the districts represent more people than do their local legislators. They're the ones that are boots on the ground, that are right there, that understand the problems they have with their facilities, and they prioritize those funds. When I would sit down with a school board and we'd have budget work sessions and we'd walk through stuff, there were probably more consideration on major maintenance items for schools than there was talking about what curriculum they were adopting. Because those are the ones people understand. Those are the ones that parents come and complain and say, well, how come that roof is leaking and we can't get anything done about it? How come my kid sits next to a window, and it's 40 degrees? I mean, those are the things that hit home with local school board members. That's where those decisions need to be made. Taking that use, all that's going to do is degrade all the fine facilities we've built over the past 25 years in Wyoming. And that's not what anybody wants, I don't think. I haven't talked to anybody that thought that was a good idea. And it doesn't matter. Oh yeah, or the swimming, like I said, Mr. Chairman, I'm so sick of hearing about swimming pools. And I had spent most of my career taking care of them. So, I understand that.
Kurt, I appreciate it. If you have a couple more points, please
Oh,
get
Mr.
to
Chairman,
them.
thank you for your time. And
Yeah,
if
you
you have any
bet.
questions.
It's always great to see you, and thank you. We always learn from you, and I appreciate it. We've got some other guys I want to get to, but thank you so much. I think let's go here and all the way down, if that's all right. I don't know who was first, but okay.
Yeah, good evening, Mr. Chairman, and it's darn near evening, so we're going to keep this very brief. Appreciate the opportunity. Mr. Chairman, my name's Dave Pickard. I represent a company called Tremco WTI. We are one of the companies that are benefit and qualified bidder on one of the AEPA contracts through New BOCES. And we've been having a conversation over the last couple of years. You might recall that I was here last year with Nada Werner, who was the executive director of New BOCES at the time. We do have some new staff at New BOCES. I want to make it clear, though, I'm representing client Tremco WTI. We've had these conversations with Mr. McComey and his team over the last couple of years. And what we're really seeking is some clarity. I think we heard it for the last 2.5, 3 hours about clarity between major maintenance funding, capital construction funding, what are component funds, and what it comes down to is the procurement process, whether it's design, bid, build, the owner's rep, construction management type, or a cooperative purchasing arrangement that New BOCES offers. And so I think what I'm going to ask now is, that's why we're here, is for some statutory clarity going forward. We had a great conversation with Director McComey a couple hours ago, and I think we're on the right path there. I do want Mr. Leonard from New BOCES to talk about the process very briefly. You have information in your packet. And I guess the second ask then would be to invite us back at your next meeting so that we can have maybe a little bit more in-depth conversation that also piggybacks on your friend Dan from Sweetwater, my new friend, hopefully, in talking about raising that threshold from $50,000 to $150,000, or what's appropriate with the inflation that we've seen since that was adopted. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll ask Dan for any questions, but I'd like to pass it over to Mr. Leonard.
Okay, thank you, Dave. It's always good to see you. Any questions? Okay, take it away. Good afternoon. Can you do a green light and pull that real close to you, if you would? Those can be a little tough to hear, so get it close to you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, my name is Benny Leonard, Director of Cooperative Purchasing for New BOCES. The purchasing side of the cooperative was formed in 2005 with the Association of Educational Purchasing, AEPA. New BOCES currently boasts about 75 active contracts that all their products and services have been bid out. They vary from school supplies, plumbing, and building maintenance, roofing, building envelopes. Currently, we help facilitate about $2.4 million in savings in the last year alone. These savings are real-world benefits funds redirected into classrooms, programs, and services to help the schools and the communities themselves. We have a full bidding process on everything that all the companies and vendors that we have to go into as well. That is included in your packet. If I can go over it if necessary, but it is in there as well.
Mr. Chairman, we're here to talk about the same things.
Oh, okay. All right. Good deal. Take it away, Mr. Farmer.
Yeah, so Brian Farmer, Wyoming School Boards Association, and I guess Mr. Pickard set the stage, and you've heard from our Northeast Wyoming BOCES, trying not to use the acronym. But Northeast Wyoming BOCES certainly serves a number of the districts across the state through a number of services, but their cooperative purchasing program really is available to all districts throughout the state. Beyond that cooperative purchasing program, Wyoming School Boards Association also has a cooperative purchasing program, and there are a couple of others that are out there that are not affiliated with organizations. But in each of these processes, there is a competitive bidding process that happens to become a part of the cooperative. And so you've got good vendors who are ready to provide efficiencies to the state that are going to help with things like furniture, fixtures, and equipment, that are going to help with providing materials and supplies for routine and major maintenance to districts. But we have this issue with statute where there are literally 3 different statutes that talk about procurement processes. So there are statutes under Title 21 that deal with the procurement of educational materials. Then there are procurement statutes under Title 9 that deal with general procurement for the state of Wyoming. And then there are statutes that deal specifically with construction procurement. And each of these have different amounts associated with them and different processes associated with them. And so, Mr. Chairman, you'll remember a few years back, the state hired some efficiencies experts. They hired Alvarez and Marcel, came in and said, what are some things we can do to enhance the buying power of the state, to save money across the state? One of the things they pointed to was competitive procurement processes that utilize this cooperative purchasing model. And so here we have a BOCES that has a program. There are other programs out there, but because of the confusion between statutes, and very specifically that confusion comes down to things like, does it have to be published in a Wyoming newspaper to be a competitive procurement process? These cooperative purchasing entities are national entities that are vetting all across the country to get the best buying power for the state. And so if we can have some consistency and we can have some clarity, and we recognize that the processes that are utilized are providing for competitive procurement in our state that allows the best buying power and invites Wyoming entities to become part of those national co-ops. So if I'm a Wyoming businessman and I've got a furniture sales store, I can get in one of these co-ops and I can sell in Florida, I can sell in Texas. But we've got to have more clarity about how to use this cooperative purchasing that's not based off of older models of procurement. We need to clarify and streamline the procurement model. And very specifically, it's 9.2.3204 that deals with the state's procurement process. And then it is in the very long list of duties of Board of Trustees at 21.3.110, and I can help LSO get deeper into the actual sites because you have to get into Romanets and all of that to get to the pieces, but different numbers, different processes, and if we can clean this up, we can get good contractors to provide products. We can help the BOCES to expand cooperative purchasing. We can use the program with WSBA. And at the end of the day, we have efficiencies. And we can get Wyoming vendors in these programs so that they can also enhance their ability to sell, not just in Wyoming, but nationwide.
Mr. Farmer, thank you. The offer that you made was exactly the first question that I was going to ask, is if you would be willing, if the committee decides to pursue this a little bit, if you would be willing to work with our legal staff and identify where we have some things that we maybe would be able to clean up in a piece of legislation. Sounds like you would be. So
absolutely, Mr.
appreciate
Chairman.
that. Do you guys have anything else? I want to get any
Yeah,
questions. for you.
Mr. Chairman, appreciate that. And, you know, my good friend Brian really covered it, what I thought we might cover at a later date in a little bit lengthier time discussion, but he cut right to the chase, and I certainly appreciate that. In respect to my client, Tremco, they're a materials company, and they do the consulting on roofs and building envelopes. And I think I want to leave the impression with the committee, they hire local contractors to do the actual work. So through the AEPA contract, it's really about the materials and that consulting and the sales force that's in Wyoming that goes out, and several of our districts in the state of Wyoming utilize them. And then the contractors are at the local level. So there's a component of keeping it local. There's a component of being able to have those efficiencies, the bidding process efficiency, the national type of pricing that occurs through this. And in particular for Tremco, it's also about the warranties that are provided for the customers, our school districts. So there's a lot more detail involved in this, but we certainly would like an opportunity at a future meeting. And I too will work with Brian and LSO if the committee desires to move forward with taking a look at a draft. We've got all those statutory references already in our books.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Pickard. I think that there's probably room for that. I'm intrigued, and I think if we've got some inconsistency, we ought to be about that anyway. And so at the end of all things today, we'll try to give some direction to that. But appreciate you guys. Any questions, committee? Representative, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been quiet for a little bit, so I might as well speak up.
You're doing good work.
I appreciate you guys being here. So we're talking about it in front of this School Facilities Select Committee, but it appears to me like this could be something that could be effective for counties, for cities, for other departments within the state. Is that correct?
Mr. Farmer, do you want to?
Mr. Chairman, absolutely. The beneficiaries of these are any public entity that can purchase through a cooperative. So the AEPA is open to other entities beyond schools, as is Buy Board, the entity that I work with. The vendors are capable of being on more than one of these cooperatives. But it's very clear that when you're dealing with school projects, you have everything from like furniture, fixture, and equipments for a new facility to roofs for maintenance to vehicles. You'd be amazed what you can buy from a cooperative. Anything you can find on Amazon, you can get out there from these purchasing cooperatives with real buying power. You can get firearms for your law enforcement. You can get equipment for your fire service personnel, and those are entities that can buy from those cooperatives.
And then a follow-up question too. So you talked a little bit about Wyoming vendors being able to be part of the cooperative. Do you know of existing Wyoming vendors that are part of this cooperative? Are they utilizing this potential?
Yes, we actually do have a handful of Wyoming ones themselves. Long Building Technologies is one of the biggest ones that we use, and they provide a lot of the HVAC services to the schools. So if they can't make it into the bidding process necessarily for the national-wide, we can have them as a state contract. And so we do have a handful of state contracts is what we call them.
Okay, good job, Representative Gehringer. Anything else, committee? Appreciate it, gentlemen. Any further testimony? Please come forward. We'll try to get to the work at hand here. Commissioner, thanks for sitting through it all.
Oh, no, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. I appreciate all the work you guys are doing. I did have one thing. We were talking about, these gentlemen were talking about procurement. And as an engineer, these systems are more complicated than just going and buying a new roof. So if you're buying equipment or wallboard or such, I would agree that the process they're talking about probably makes some sense, a vehicle. But there are this components to these systems that go beyond just replacing the roof. There's many times something that's more complex than that. And I didn't hear any indication that they're using professional services of an architect or an engineer to evaluate these systems on the ground locally. And I think that, from my perspective, when it comes to actually major building components, you need to involve an engineer or an architect, depending on the system, to at least evaluate it to find out, is there a reason this failed prematurely? Because otherwise, much like we've seen with maybe Senator Rothfuss, Mr. Chairman said, where they've had problems with the school, a lot of times the stuff I see is, and I'm not anti-CMAR, but the system's built so that the construction manager, similar to what these folks are talking about, is driving the trade. And the people who know the systems from inside out and designed it aren't involved. If the engineer that designed the foundation standing there, they're going to say, no, you can't put that crap soil in there and put a foundation on it. You got to put pit run or a crushed material and compact it. So I guess from coming at it from a professional side, knowing what fails and going back and trying to fix it, I think we have to be very careful not to put procurement on the same level with actual major maintenance and assume that all of it's going to fall the same, because I think that professional element has to be built into there, and they need to have a license in the state of Wyoming and understand how the systems work. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner, good cautions. Appreciate that. Any question? Doesn't look like it. Onward.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'll make this brief. I'm Matt Flett. I'm the Chief Financial Officer in the Natrona County School District, mostly because I have a 15-minute drive home and I feel bad for keeping you guys here. I've been racking my brain the last hour in the back of the room, and I wanted to touch base on something and have it come full circle to make sure the committee understood, and I think you guys are there. Never once did I think about using 10% major maintenance funding for enhancements to build an enhancement. Like, that's never crossed my mind. And we get $11 million of major maintenance funding a year. And I think one of the reasons I never thought of it, one, you can't do it, statutorily it's not allowed, but two, it would get caught in our annual independent audit, as I was thinking about it back there. So ironically, there's a $6 million enhancement right out that window, the MAC, that we built back in 2019. So at the end of a fiscal year, let's say a building's $6 million, and we've spent $2 million on it. Well, for our audit, we have to call it construction in progress. And our auditors are gonna say, okay, here's $3 million of building the MAC. You've spent $1 million out of major maintenance and $2 million out of the capital projects fund. Right away, they're gonna say, you can't do that. This is a new building. So I just kind of wanted, from the Natrona County School District perspective to this committee, I kind of just want to reassure the committee that that would never happen in our districts. It would get caught from an audit. It would get caught from us centrally doing our own internal audit. And I never thought of that until I heard about it today. But just kind of coming full circle of the controls we have in place so that 10% major maintenance funding for enhancements isn't ever going to be used to build an enhancement in this district. So just wanted to come around, close the loop, and appreciate you guys' time. Let me know if you have any questions.
Matt, thank you. Really appreciate it. And Senator Rothfuss, there's your answer right there. Yeah, so appreciate it, Matt. Thank you. Any further testimony this evening? Any further public testimony? Is there anybody online?
No, there is not, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. I'm going to close public testimony for the day. And committee, before we get to Tanya, who can maybe remind us of anything that we talked about or did today, what is your pleasure? Senator Rothfuss.
Mr. Chairman, I have two motions on two of the topics that we discussed today. The first one is with regard to education suitability. My motion, I move that we direct staff to work with the state construction department to begin developing options for addressing education suitability for school facilities for our consideration at the next committee meeting, and that we send a letter to Management Council requesting authority to contract with an expert consultant to assist in this work using existing education litigation funds. Mr. Chairman, if there's a second, I'll explain the motion.
Seconded by Senator Dockstader. Please continue, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So This provides us with an opportunity to explore some options between our LSO and obviously the department with regard to education suitability, which we've heard about, we understand is something that we need to address, but I don't know that we have a solution before us. But it also brings in an expert consultant because this is something that is a subject of litigation. And typically when we're working in the litigation space, it's important for us to have a third-party independent expert that we can rely on. We have those consultants for most of the other work we do, and we have funds specifically already set aside for that through our education litigation fund, so it wouldn't require a new appropriation. We're just continuing the same process that we do elsewhere. So I think that's an appropriate approach for us to get this started. We won't obviously have a conclusion at the next meeting, but I think it's important for us to get it on our agenda, to talk it through, and then to work through management council to get the expertise that we need to solve that problem.
Okay, thank you, Senator. There's a motion on the floor. Any further discussion? Any questions? Senator Smith, go ahead.
Expound on that just a little bit, Senator Rothfuss. I mean, so we're looking at how do we define suitability, and then how do you measure it? Is that going to be included in that? I'm just kind of, it's pretty abstract to me. Just want to make sure I'm understanding. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, Senator, that's exactly right. We would need a way to measure some type of rubric, some sort of objective standard, some ability to actually say what is and isn't suitable, and then what would we do about it? And we have in statute what we do about capacity. We have in statute what we do about condition score, but we don't for this. So we kind of need both sides of that put together, and we don't have any aspect of a plan at this point in time. So it's trying to build that.
Yeah, it's a good question, Senator. I think we're talking parameters, and I like the motion for what it's worth. Are you ready for a question? Representative Geringer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What do you anticipate the cost of something like that being?
Senator, any thoughts, any ideas on that?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'd look to staff. We have several consultants that we utilize for recalibration and elsewhere. Do we have a sense of what that might cost?
Tanya, we've hired consultants before. Can you opine on that a little bit?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, Senator, Representative, I don't have a specific consultant or cost in mind, but certainly before we would execute a contract, we would go before Management Council. That's the body that approves contracts, and we would obviously inform this body once we had identified the appropriate individual. I don't have a number of what it's going to take to accomplish this work. We haven't thought about this concept until this afternoon.
Representative Provenza, you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I mean, I think the cost would be cheaper than continuing to fail constitutionality concerns.
Well, that could be. So so my experience, Representative, has been that these individuals, I don't think would be a huge drain on the line item that has some funds in it right now. We'll try to do a little homework. If we were to go to our management council and request this, as your representative, I would try to be well-versed and try to get arms around what we anticipate there, but I don't think it's a backbreaker. Did you have another thought or question?
Yeah, I did. And
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, to be fair, I understand that there is a need for looking at education suitability, and I understand that this will likely cost less than what the potential pitfalls are. However, if we're talking, I have no concept of how much this is going to be, whether it's going to be a $5,000 expenditure or a $500,000 expenditure, and that's a big difference. And so thank you, Mr. Chairman, for saying that it's not going to be a huge expenditure, but I still don't have a feel for what that is. That's number one. Number two, what kind of time frame is this going to take? Are we going to have this done before August? Is it going to take a month? Is it something that we can have a better idea of the confines of what this study is going to be and the cost and the time frame that it's going to take in order and still take action on that before our third meeting? Is that something that can be developed? I'm just to have this come out of left field and not have a concept of what's going on, it makes me a little hesitant to just jump in and say, yeah, I'll vote for this.
Yeah, go ahead, Senator.
I think it's safe to say it would be between 5 and 500,000, so we can narrow it between those two bookends. We do have some contracts with our consultants that my suggestion, I think those are probably confidential to some degree, so we can get you that information. I don't think it's public information. And so we can get that information, which would give a little guide, but certainly between those values, not cheap. It's not going to be 5K. It's just not. As far as the timeline, this is not an immediate thing. I don't know whether we would have anybody under contract by the August meeting. It will take management council a little while to decide. And then after they decide, we would have to put out some type of a request for proposals for interest. That would have to be written up. It would probably come back potentially even to this committee, depending on how specific we want to be. So we might have a chance, in either through email or through our next committee meeting, to weigh in on what we would want that scope of work to look like. And so part of that comes down to the engagement between staff and the department to figure out what that scope of work might even look like, what the questions actually are. So we could consider that. And again, I'd say, as it's reviewed, I've served a lot of time on management council, and these do come to management council for consideration for exactly the concerns you have. You know, is this an appropriate cost? Is it cost effective? What's the scope of it? And so I've been in those conversations through management council, but I think we could certainly involve this committee in that scope of work as well. There's nothing that says that we couldn't be reviewing those documents at the same time. So I'm sorry it is a little vague on the dollar amount, but I don't know that we know enough, but I think we have to get that process started to get it done in a timely manner. And the final thing I would say with regard to the timeline is, I don't know that we would have an action at our last meeting this year and would be able to finalize anything. I think we have to figure out what we need to do and what we need to know. If we have some low-hanging fruit that we could do this is a budget session coming up. If we have something ready for a budget session, great. If not, you know, a lot of the work that we do on this select committee is multi-year work. You get going, you put things together, and you move it forward when it needs to be. Now we're trying to be responsive on a topic that we know we have to take action on, but we also don't want to, you know, just jump to a quick piece of legislation the first thing that we come up with, because it has to be legally sound. So I hope that addresses those concerns, and I'm sorry that I can't be more specific, but I'm just as, you know, I have as many question marks probably as you do.
So just real quickly to add, Senator, and I'll go to you in just a second. Senator Roth was touched on something that I was going to point out, which is if we can't get to the finish line this fall, that's okay. We're going to be together, you know, for this 2-year period of time, and it may be something that we have to carry over. It might be something that in our October meeting, we like what we're seeing. We've already got something on the table, and we request one more day. And we can do that. We could all come back together in December and decide whether or not we want to forward some legislation. The senator's right, it is a budget session, so, you know, that comes into play too. But Senator Dockstader.
Mr. Chairman, that's well said. We don't know the expense till we get into it and take a look at it. Then the management council and this committee can screen it further.
Good point. Representative Bratton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So do we have to have both of these things together? Can we just decide to look at it with council and then decide if we want to draft a letter later? So I'll make a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator, go ahead.
it certainly is a divisible motion, so you can take them as a dividable motion. The second one depends, actually, the second one depends on the first one, I would say, to some degree. So we could split it into two separate motions in order, and I'm happy to do that. I think it's important to do the second one, but if you'd be more comfortable that way, I don't even know if I had a second, but I'll withdraw my motion at this time, Mr. Chairman. Oh, I did have a second, that's right, Senator Dockstader. I'll withdraw my motion and make the first half as motion number 1, if you're more comfortable with that, so that that's the consideration portion of the motion and not the letter to Management Council.
Okay, that's considered friendly by the second.
Great.
So it is seconded by Senator Dockstader. Does everybody understand what we're up to now? We're going to take the first part of the motion, which is to take up this issue of suitability at the next meeting. Okay, does everybody understand? All in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Okay, that motion passes. Now,
Yep.
second consideration, Senator.
Mr. Chairman, now the second half of the motion, which is the letter to Management Council requesting authority to contract with an expert consultant to assist in this work and taking the funds out of litigation funds. I do think it's essential that we get this work started. It may take a while. And if we delay this action until we hear about it at the next meeting, then we can probably rest assured that we won't have an opportunity before session to actually take any action if we have anything in mind. I just don't see where we could start the process in August, have somebody on retainer, and then get things moving forward. Again, it goes through quite a process, and if Management Council wants to push pause on it for that, they certainly can do it as well. But I would encourage everyone to vote in support of that letter to Management Council.
Senator Dockstader has seconded that as well. Any further discussion on the second piece? Representative Geringer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Despite my my questions earlier, I do understand the need for trying to get answers as quick as possible, and it does make me feel consider this better that there will still be legislative oversight through the Management Council in the actual pulling the trigger, if you will, on getting this going. And so I will support your motion, but I would have liked to have that kind of information in advance. So thank you.
Anything further? Okay, Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I mean, looking at the number of members on Management Council and this body, I think if we put it forward, Management Council approves, we're looking at about a third of the number of legislators we have. I guess less than that, but it's a sizable amount. So I think if we can get it through both of those, then we're on the right path.
Well, very well stated. And committee, I would just add, and then we'll take a vote, but this has come up in litigation. It is part of that document that we've all read. And so all in favor of the second half of the motion, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. We do have one no, but the motion passes. And I'll be glad to work with our legal staff to draft a note to Management Council, and I will keep you all posted on where we are with that. And we will take up that topic in August. Are there further other considerations? Senator Rothfuss?
Yeah, I had one other motion based on Director McComey's discussion about the 115% to 135%. So my motion is that we draft legislation to make the 2025 Senate File 34 change to the allowable educational square footage from 115% to 135% of the School Facilities Commission's adequacy standards permanent. So remember, it was 1 year, and this motion would make it permanent. If there's a second, I'd be happy to explain a little bit more detail.
Do I hear a second to that motion? Seconded by Representative Provenza. Discussion.
Yeah, so Mr. Chairman, unfortunately, the bill as we passed it out last year had it a permanent change because, again, as Mr. McComey noted, it literally saves billions of dollars in the long run for the state to appropriately manage the major maintenance. That's how we passed it out last year. It made it to the Senate floor, and there was an amendment to say, well, let's just do it for 1 year because recalibration's coming up. And that carried in the Senate. I don't know why it carried in the Senate, because recalibration will not in any way, shape, or form touch this decision. Has nothing to do with recalibration. It has nothing to do with the funding model. And if we don't have legislation, we don't have a vehicle really in the budget session to get it done, and we'll end up missing a year. So it'll drop back from 135 to 115, and we'll go back to underfunding major maintenance, which costs the state. So I think it's important for us to at least consider that, talk through and hear testimony at the next meeting. We're not committing to that bill. It's just a drafting request for that bill. But I think we should once again talk it through and have a little more in-depth analysis to what Mr. McComey brought up. I think that was, one of the more important bills probably last year, and I was disappointed to see that amendment go into effect.
So the motion is to take that forward to the next meeting and take a look at a bill that was considered last year. So any further discussion? All in favor of that motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, no. There was a no, but the motion has passed. So we will bring that forward. I am interested, Tanya, I'm looking over your direction. I'm interested in the procurement piece. And I would be interested in that being a topic at our next meeting to at least, and we had the offer out front here of individuals who would be happy to help identify some conflicts in those procurement statutes. And I just think it would be a good informative topic for this committee to at least take a look at that. So would you please put that on the list and committee, if that meets with your approval, I'll just have that be a topic so we can take a look at it. Anything further? Senator, anything? Senator, representative? Okay, let's, Tanya, you and Matt, Ashley, Catherine, what did we do today?
Mr. Chairman, I think the other directive you gave us is to draft a bill after the budget is presented to the School Facilities Commission for your consideration at the August meeting as sort of a first step of looking at a potential budget going into the next budget session.
Thank you for that. Yeah, we will have that. And I want to thank the agency for its hard work. That'll be the earliest that we will have the chance to look at that. That's a bill that we don't necessarily, committee, have to pass in August. We just need to prepare that by the end of October. So we will literally have a couple of meetings to take a hard look at this budget. So that'll be good. Senator Smith.
On the education suitability vote that we just had, that we're going to hire somebody to look at, to define that for us. But that doesn't mean that we have to even send it on, right? We can still kill it if we don't like it, right? Like if it's just going to cost us $1 billion and we could just like kill it in the next meeting, correct?
Absolutely. All this is to make sure that we get this topic to the table, Senator. So well stated. There may be pieces of it. There may be a blanket proposal. It could, but it is certainly something that I think is worth our time as a committee. So, Madam Vice Chairman, any final words of wisdom before we got to get out of here at some point?
Well, this was definitely, I think I said, it was an educational experience, especially for all of us that are new, but an information overload. And so, but thank you to staff who provided us so much information. I've been poring over this for the last week, and I know now that I've sat through, I'm sure we're going to be poring over that for the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So I appreciate it. I don't want to keep everybody. And thanks, guys, for everybody showing up.
Well, ditto. And I want to thank the committee. I know that was a lot, especially for our newcomers. There's just an awful lot to this. But I really like our committee, and I think we have a chance to do some really good work together. Thank you for the day. Appreciate all of our visitors. It's always good to see all of you, and thanks for the work you do out across. Director, we'll be in touch. Keep us posted. Can't wait to see you in August, see what you've been up to. Commissioners, we appreciate you guys, and we look forward to what you're going to bring us in August. Committee, we're adjourned.